We grow up believing that fate has a plan, that somewhere in this cruel world, there's a person destined to see past our scars, our failures, our ruined faces and find us beautiful. The elders tell us stories around winter fires about true mates, about bonds so powerful they transcend reason. They make it sound like magic, like salvation, but here's what they don't tell you in those stories. What happens when your mate takes one look at you and walks away? What happens when the bond that's supposed to save you becomes the final proof that you were never meant to be saved at all? My name is Velma Bernard, and before you hear the story of how an alpha king looked beneath my veil and called me his mate, you need to understand something fundamental. I didn't believe him. How could I? I'd spent 19 years learning exactly what I was worth. A monster doesn't become beautiful just because someone claims to see beauty. Sometimes, the cruelest lies are the ones wrapped in kindness. This is not a story about how love fixed me. This is a story about how I learned the difference between being wanted and being seen, and how that difference almost destroyed us both. Chapter 1. When Fate Becomes Cruelty. The morning of the rejection ceremony, my stepmother Cordelia laid out my clothes with the careful precision of someone dressing a corpse. Black wool dress, scratchy and shapeless. The veil, always the veil, this one made of thick muslin that obscured everything from my nose to my collarbone. And the sash, deep crimson, so the crowd would be able to spot me easily in the ceremony circle. "Try not to cry," she said, smoothing the fabric with hands that never touched my skin. "It stains the veil, and we'll need to burn it afterward anyway. No sense ruining it with theatrics." I sat on the edge of my bed in the basement room they'd given me after my father remarried. After my mother died, giving birth to me died, trying to bring a child into the world who came out wrong, cursed, marked. The room smelled like damp earth and old regret. "Will father be there?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Cordelia's laugh was short and sharp. "Your father has more important concerns than watching you get what you deserve. Lissa's first transformation is tonight, a real cause for celebration." Lissa, my half-sister, 14 years old, beautiful, perfect Lissa who would shift into her wolf form for the first time under tonight's full moon, while I 19 and still human, still broken, still unable to access the most basic gift of our kind would be standing in a ceremony circle, watching my fated mate tell the world I wasn't worth keeping. The failures stacked up like stones, cannot shift while everyone else runs wild under the full moon. Barren, according to the pack healer who'd examined me last year and announced my womb was inhospitable to life. Scarred beyond recognition, and now, about to be rejected by the one person fate claimed was supposed to love me anyway. "The veil stays on during the ceremony," Cordelia continued, moving toward the door. "Darius has already seen your face, that's why he's rejecting you. After all, no need to traumatize the rest of the pack twice in one day." She left me alone with that, her footsteps disappearing up the wooden stairs. I stared at the veil in my lap. I'd been wearing variations of it since I was 7 years old, since the day a merchant's child had seen my face at the market and screamed so loudly his mother thought he was being murdered. The pack elders had decided it was kinder this way. Kinder for everyone else, they meant. Easier to pretend I didn't exist if they didn't have to look at me. The scars ran from my right temple down to my jaw, thick, raised tissue that pulled my eye into a permanent half-squint and twisted my mouth into something between a snarl and a grimace. The pack doctors said it looked like burns, but my skin had been this way since birth. Marked, they said, cursed by the moon goddess for my mother's sins. What sins could warrant such punishment, they never said. It was enough that I existed as proof that someone had done something unforgivable. I had learned to escape into stories. Books were my salvation, tales of heroes and villains, of quests and conquests, of people whose scars made them interesting rather than repulsive. In stories, the broken could be redeemed, the cursed could be saved. Reality, I'd learned, was far less generous. I pulled the veil over my face, securing it with pins that dug into my scalp. The world became a blur of fabric and shadow. Better this way. Always better this way. The ceremony circle was in the center of pack territory, a clearing surrounded by ancient oak trees, whose roots were said to run so deep they touched the bones of our ancestors. Appropriate, I thought, for a ritual execution. Because that's what a rejection ceremony really was, the killing of a bond before it could take root. 200 pack members formed a ring around the clearing, their faces eager with the kind of anticipation usually reserved for festivals. Children sat on their fathers' shoulders, teenagers clustered in whispering groups. The elders occupied chairs of honor at the northern point, their expressions appropriately solemn but their eyes bright with interest. I walked to the center alone. Protocol dictated that the rejected party enter first, stand in the middle, and wait for their mate to join them. A public claiming before the public severing, theater designed to remind everyone involved of the stakes. My hands were shaking. I clasped them together beneath the veil, trying to steady myself, trying to remember the words my mother had allegedly said before she died. Some of us are born to be lessons for others. That doesn't make us less important, just different kinds of necessary. I'd held on to that for years, a lifeline in the dark. But standing here now, watching the crowd watch me with a mixture of pity and disgust, I couldn't remember why those words had ever brought comfort. Darius entered from the south. He was beautiful in the way that pack warriors often were: tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the fluid confidence of someone who'd never questioned their place in the world. His dark hair was pulled back in the traditional warrior's knot. His eyes, amber gold, scanned the crowd before finally, reluctantly, landing on me. I'd known Darius was my mate for exactly 14 days. The bond had snapped into place during the full moon gathering, a sudden electric awareness that had nearly dropped me to my knees. I'd felt his shock, his immediate revulsion, his desperate hope that he'd imagined it. He hadn't. The pack's healer had confirmed it with a simple test, a drop of my blood mixed with his, turning silver in the ceremonial bowl. Undeniable proof of a mate bond blessed by the moon goddess herself. Darius had looked at that silver-stained bowl like it contained poison. Now he crossed the clearing toward me, and I could feel his wolf pushing against his skin, fighting the bond, even as it tried to pull him closer. I understood. The mate bond was supposed to be irresistible, overwhelming, but apparently, my face was more powerful than divine intervention. He stopped 3 feet away, close enough to complete the ritual, far enough that no one could mistake this for anything but duty. Alpha Caster, our pack leader, stepped forward. He was an older man, gray-haired and weary, who'd always treated me with distant kindness, which was more than most offered. "We gather under the full moon's approach to witness a sacred rite," Caster began, his voice carrying across the silent clearing. "The mate bond is the moon goddess's greatest gift, a connection of souls, a joining of fates. But the goddess, in her wisdom, also grants us choice. Free will, the ability to accept or reject what fate offers." I watched Darius through the blur of my veil. His jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. "Darius Walters," Caster continued, "do you accept Velma Bernard as your fated mate, bound by blood and blessed by the goddess?" The crowd held its breath. Darius looked at me. Really looked, for the first time since the bond had formed. I felt his wolf reach down the connection between us. Felt the instinctive pull, the way nature itself was screaming at him that I was his, that we belonged to each other. Then, I felt him shove it away. "I reject the bond," he said, his voice steady and clear. "I reject Velma Bernard as my mate. May the moon goddess witness my choice and sever what she has made." The words hit like physical blows. Even expecting them, even knowing they were coming, the reality of hearing them spoken aloud made something crack deep in my chest. The bond, already fragile and new, began to tear. It felt like dying. Caster turned to me, his eyes genuinely sad now. "Velma Bernard, do you accept this rejection?" This was the moment where I was supposed to show dignity, grace, where I was supposed to thank him for his honesty and release him from the bond with my blessing. Instead, I heard myself ask, "Why?" The word hung in the air between us. Darius flinched, like I'd struck him. "You know why?" he said quietly. "Say it." My voice was stronger than I expected. "You're rejecting me in front of the entire pack. The least you can do is tell them why." His face flushed with anger. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." "Harder for who?" I took a step toward him, and he instinctively stepped back. The crowd noticed. A ripple of whispers moved through them. You're the one breaking a sacred bond. You're the one spitting in the face of the moon goddess's gift. So say it. Tell them why I'm not good enough. I will see this as Nas gave. Velma. Is it because I can't shift? I asked. Because half the pack knows humans who've married into wolf packs and been accepted. Is it because I'm barren? Because I know for a fact that Roland took a mate who couldn't bear children, and no one held a rejection ceremony for them? Stop, Darius said, his voice tight. Or is it just my face? I reached for my veil. Is it that simple? That shallow? Don't, he said sharply. Don't take that off. Why not? You've already seen it. You've already decided it's enough reason to reject a mate bond. Why shouldn't everyone else see what's so horrifying that it overwrites the will of the goddess herself? My fingers found the pins. Velma, I'm warning you. I pulled the veil away. The crowd's reaction was immediate. Gasps. A child started crying. Someone in the back made a sound of disgust. I watched Darius's face as he stared at my scars, the twisted flesh, the pulled eye, the ruined mouth. Watched him look at me like I was something that had crawled out of a grave. There, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Now everyone knows. The cursed girl with the monster's face finally showed the world what she really is. But I wasn't looking at the crowd anymore. I was looking at my father. He stood near the back, half hidden behind a group of warriors. Our eyes met across the clearing, and I saw him turn away, actually turn his back and walk into the trees, disappearing before the ceremony was even finished. Something inside me went very cold and very quiet. I accept the rejection, I said, turning back to Darius. I, Velma Bernard, accept Darius Walters's rejection of our mate bond. May the moon goddess witness my choice and sever what remains. The bond snapped with a sound only I could hear, a brittle breaking, like ice cracking beneath weight. The pain was excruciating, a tearing sensation that started in my chest and radiated outward until I couldn't tell where I ended and the agony began. I didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't give them that satisfaction. I simply pulled my veil back over my face, turned, and walked out of the ceremony circle with my head high. Behind me, I heard Castor dismiss the crowd, heard them begin to disperse, already moving on to more interesting topics. Lissa's transformation tonight, the upcoming hunt, what they'd have for dinner, my rejection, my pain, my public humiliation already forgotten. Just another piece of entertainment consumed and discarded. I made it to the tree line before my legs gave out. I don't know how long I sat there, hidden in the shadows of the forest, trying to remember how to breathe through the pain. The bond's severing felt like a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding, a constant, throbbing reminder of what I'd lost. What I'd never really had in the first place. The sun was setting when I heard footsteps approaching, not pack members. The gait was wrong, too measured, too purposeful. And there was something else, a presence that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Power, the kind that made the air itself feel heavier. A man emerged from between the trees. He was tall, dressed in dark traveling clothes that marked him as an outsider. His hair was black as midnight, pulled back from a face that was all sharp angles and hard edges. But it was his eyes that caught me, pale silver, like moonlight on water, scanning the forest with predatory awareness. He stopped when he saw me huddled against the tree trunk, my veil askew, my face partially visible in the dying light. "I'm looking for Alpha Castor," he said. His voice was deep, carrying the kind of authority that expected obedience. "I was told I'd find Bernard Pack territory here. I should have been afraid." Strange male, clearly powerful, finding me alone in the forest. But I was so numb from the day's events that fear felt like an emotion meant for someone else. "Ceremony circle," I said, pointing vaguely back toward Pack territory. "Center of the clearing. Can't miss it." He studied me for a long moment, and I became suddenly aware of how I must look, crumpled against a tree, veil half off, probably with tear tracks visible on the unmarred side of my face. "Are you hurt?" he asked. The question was so unexpected I almost laughed. In a manner of speaking. "Do you need help getting back? I need to not exist for a while, if that's an option." His expression didn't change, but something flickered in those silver eyes. I've felt that way myself on occasion. Somehow I doubt that. I adjusted my veil, suddenly self-conscious. You look like someone who's never had a bad day in his life. Appearances, he said quietly, can be deceiving. We stood there in uncomfortable silence for a moment. Then he moved as if to continue toward pack territory, hesitated, and turned back. What's your name? Does it matter? I asked, didn't I? Velma, I said finally. Velma Bernard. Something changed in his expression, a sharpening of attention, like a predator spotting prey. Bernard, he repeated. Any relation to Alpha Castor? His beta's daughter. Well, his beta's cursed useless daughter who just got rejected by her mate in front of the entire pack. But who's keeping track? I don't know why I told him that. Maybe because he was a stranger, and strangers couldn't hurt me any worse than my own people already had. Maybe because I was so far past caring that honesty felt like the only weapon I had left. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, I'm sorry. 2 words, simple, sincere, and somehow more devastating than anything that had happened in the ceremony circle, because they sounded like he meant them. Don't be, I said, pushing myself to my feet. My legs were shaky, but I managed to stay upright. It's not your problem. Perhaps not, but that doesn't make it any less cruel. I looked at him, really looked, trying to figure out what kind of person stopped to talk to a veiled stranger in the woods, who spoke to her like she was human rather than something to be pitied or avoided. You should go, I said. Whatever business you have with Alpha Castor, I'm sure it's more important than this. Probably, he agreed, but he didn't move. Then why are you still here? He tilted his head slightly, studying me with an intensity that made me want to shrink back against the tree. I'm not entirely sure. Before I could respond, voices echoed through the forest. Pack members, probably looking for me. Or maybe just passing through on their way to the evening's celebrations. Either way, I didn't want to be found. Go, I said again, more urgently this time. They can't see you talking to me. It won't look good for either of us. Why not? Because I'm cursed, remember? Bad luck, probably contagious. You don't want whatever darkness follows me to attach itself to you. The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. I think I can handle a bit of darkness. The voices were getting closer. I could hear Cordelia calling my name, her tone sharp with irritation rather than concern. Please, I said, and hated how desperate the word sounded. Just go. He studied me for another moment, those silver eyes seeming to see far more than I wanted to reveal. Then he nodded once, and melted back into the shadows between the trees, disappearing so completely it was like he'd never been there at all. I adjusted my veil one final time, took a shaky breath, and stepped out to meet my stepmother's wrath. Behind me, I could have sworn I heard a voice whisper on the wind. I'll see you again, Velma Bernard. But when I turned to look, there was nothing there but darkness, and the first stars beginning to emerge in the evening sky. Chapter 2. Traded like tribute. Cordelia found me 3 minutes later, her face twisted with the particular brand of fury reserved for public embarrassments. What were you thinking? She hissed, grabbing my arm hard enough to bruise. Taking off your veil like that? In front of everyone? Darius had already seen my face, I said dully. What difference did it make? The difference is that now the entire pack has that image burned into their minds. Do you know how many people came up to me afterward asking if you were cursed by dark magic? If you were contagious? She dragged me through the forest, her nails digging into my skin. Your father is humiliated. Lys's transformation ceremony is supposed to be tonight, but now everyone's talking about you instead. Good, I thought but didn't say. Let them talk. Let them whisper about the monster girl who dared to show her face. At least they were finally being honest about what they thought of me. We emerged from the forest near the Beta's house, the place I'd grown up. Though it had stopped feeling like home the day Cordelia moved in, she shoved me toward the back entrance, the servant's door, because even now I wasn't allowed to use the front. Your father wants to see you, she said, in his study, now. My stomach dropped. My father and I hadn't had a real conversation in years. He communicated through Cordelia, through closed doors, through carefully orchestrated absences that made it clear I was an obligation he'd rather forget. Why? How should I know? Maybe he's finally going to do what he should have done years ago and send you away. She released my arm with a final, violent shove. Try not to make things worse than you already have. She disappeared into the house through the main entrance, leaving me alone at the servant's door. I stood there for a long moment, my arm throbbing where she'd grabbed me, my chest still aching from the severed bond. Everything hurt. My body, my heart, my pride. I wanted to run back into the forest, to disappear into the trees and never come back. Instead, I climbed the servant's stairs to my father's study. Beta Tobias Bernard sat behind his massive oak desk, looking older than I remembered. His dark hair had gone mostly gray in the past few years, and new lines creased his face, marks of stress, of burden, of a man carrying more weight than he could handle. He didn't look up when I entered. "Sit," he said, his voice flat. I sat in the chair across from his desk, the same chair where, as a child, I used to sit and tell him about the books I'd read, the stories I'd invented, the dreams I had, back when he still looked at me, back when I was still his daughter instead of his shame. "The rejection ceremony was a disaster," he said finally, still not meeting my eyes. "You humiliated Darius. You humiliated yourself. You humiliated this family." "Darius rejected me," I said quietly. "I just made him say why." "You made him say it by forcing him to look at your face in public. Do you have any idea what kind of position that puts me in? I'm the beta. I'm supposed to be able to control my own household." He finally looked up, and the coldness in his eyes made me flinch. "You're a liability, Velma. You always have been." The words shouldn't have hurt. I'd known them already, felt them in every interaction, every avoided glance, every time he chose Cordelia and Lissa over me, but hearing them spoken aloud was different. Final. "I didn't choose to be born this way," I said. "No. But your mother chose to have you despite every warning, and it killed her. And now I'm left dealing with the consequences." "I'm not a consequence. I'm your daughter. You're a reminder of the worst day of my life." His voice was harsh now, all pretense of paternal distance stripped away. "Every time I look at you, I see her dying. I see the choice she made you over me. Over the life we could have had together." The room spun slightly. I gripped the arms of the chair, trying to anchor myself. "So what now?" I asked. "You want me to leave? Disappear? Make it easier for you to pretend I never existed?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then he opened a drawer in his desk and pulled out an envelope sealed with red wax official pack business. "A representative from the Alpha King's court arrived this afternoon," he said. "He's collecting the tribute. Every pack in the kingdom owed tribute to the Alpha King, a percentage of our resources, our wealth, our loyalty. It was the price of his protection, his governance, the stability he provided. Usually the tribute was paid in gold, in goods, in pledges of warriors for his army. What does that have to do with me?" My father's jaw tightened. "This year, the king has requested something different. He's building a new wing of his castle, needs additional staff. He's asked each pack to provide one member for service." The air in the room suddenly felt very thin. "You're sending me to the Alpha King's castle," I said slowly. "As a servant, as tribute," he corrected. "It's an honor, an honor." I laughed, and the sound was bitter even to my own ears. "You're trading me away like livestock, and you're calling it an honor. You'll have a position, food, shelter, more than you have here." He pushed the envelope across the desk toward me. "The king's representative is leaving tomorrow at dawn. You'll go with him. Does Alpha Castor know about this?" The Alpha approved the decision himself. "You're the most expendable member of the pack." He said it without inflection, like he was discussing weather patterns. "No mate, no wolf, no future here. At least in the king's service, you might be useful. Expendable." The word echoed in my head, joining all the other words I'd collected over the years. Cursed. Broken. Worthless. Monster. "What if I refuse?" "You won't." My father stood, signaling the end of the conversation. "Because refusing means bringing shame on this pack, on your Alpha, on me. And despite everything, I don't think you're selfish enough to do that." He was right, and we both knew it. I'd spent 19 years trying not to be more of a burden than I already was. I'd worn the veil, stayed in the shadows, made myself as small and forgettable as possible. What was one more sacrifice? When do I leave? Dawn. Pack light, you won't need much. Your new life starts tomorrow. He walked to the door, clearly done with me. But I couldn't help asking one more question. Did you volunteer me? Or did you have to be asked? He paused, his hand on the doorknob. For a moment I thought he might actually answer honestly. Then he opened the door and left without a word. I sat alone in his study, holding the envelope with the king's seal, and realized I was being given away by my own father to a stranger who probably didn't even know my name. At least it couldn't be worse than here. I spent that night packing my meager belongings. It didn't take long, I didn't own much. A few changes of clothes, all plain and dark. My collection of veils. The books I'd managed to save over the years. Stories I'd read so many times, the pages were falling apart. And my mother's journal. It was the only thing of hers I had left. The only proof that she'd existed beyond the stories people told about her. I'd read it cover to cover dozens of times, searching for some explanation, some reason why she'd chosen to have me despite knowing it would kill her. I never found one. The journal was mostly mundane, daily observations, pack gossip, recipes for herb remedies, but scattered throughout were small, cryptic entries that never quite made sense. The dreams are getting worse. I see him in the darkness, waiting. TB says I'm imagining things, but I know what I saw. Visited the old temple today. The stones are warm. They shouldn't be warm. If I'm right about what's coming, she'll need to be stronger than any of us. I'm sorry, little one. I'm so sorry for what you'll have to carry. The entries stopped 3 days before she died, giving birth to me. I held the journal now, sitting on the edge of my bed in the basement room, and wondered what she'd meant. What dreams? What temple? What was I supposed to be carrying? Questions I'd never get answered. Just like I'd never know why my father hated me, or why I'd been born marked, or why the moon goddess had given me a mate only to ensure I'd be rejected. Some mysteries, I supposed, weren't meant to be solved. Dawn came too quickly. I dressed in my plainest clothes, secured my thickest veil, and carried my single bag up the servants' stairs. Cordelia was waiting in the kitchen, looking thoroughly satisfied with the morning's outcome. "The king's man is waiting at the gate," she said. "Try not to embarrass us on your way out." I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say to her. Lissa appeared in the doorway, still in her nightgown, her hair tousled from sleep. She looked like an angel, everything I would never be. The transformation ceremony had gone perfectly, they said. She'd shifted into a beautiful silver wolf, graceful and strong. "Velma?" she said softly. "Are you really leaving?" "Yes." "Will you come back?" "I don't think so." She looked like she wanted to say more, but Cordelia placed a hand on her shoulder and steered her away. "Let your sister go, darling. She has a long journey ahead. My father didn't come to say goodbye." I walked through the house I'd grown up in, past the rooms I wasn't allowed to enter, past the family portraits that didn't include me, past the life I'd never really been part of. The king's representative was waiting at the gate, standing beside a sleek black carriage emblazoned with the royal crest. He was a thin man with sharp features and calculating eyes, dressed in the formal attire of the king's court. "Velma Bernard?" he asked. "Yes. I am Chancellor Vale, advisor to the Alpha King. You'll be accompanying me to the castle to fulfill your pack's tribute obligation." He looked me up and down, his expression unreadable. "You understand that once we leave, you are no longer under your pack's protection? You belong to the king's household now." Belong, like I was property being transferred from one owner to another. "I understand." "Then get in. We have a long journey ahead." I climbed into the carriage without looking back. Couldn't look back. If I did, I might see my father watching from his study window, might see some flicker of regret or farewell, and I couldn't handle that. Better to believe he was as indifferent to my leaving as he'd been to my staying. Chancellor Vale settled across from me, and the carriage lurched into motion. Through the small window, I watched Bernard Pack territory disappear behind us, the ceremony circle where I'd been rejected, the forest where I'd spent countless hours hiding, the house that had never been a home. "Tell me about yourself," Vale said, pulling out a leather notebook. The beta's report was sparse. Wire. There's not much to tell. No wolf, correct? Correct. And the veil? He gestured at my face. Injury? Disfigurement? Birth defect. He made a note in his book. Can you read? Yes. Write? Yes. Any particular skills? Cooking, cleaning, sewing? I'm good with books, records. I can organize things. Another note. Interesting. And you're aware of why you were selected for this position? Because I'm expendable, I thought. Because my own pack would rather sacrifice me than anyone else. Because I was available, I said instead. Vale's mouth twitched in something that might have been amusement. Diplomatic answer. You'll need that at court. What will I be doing there? That depends on what the king decides when he meets you. He closed his notebook, his expression becoming more serious. I should warn you, the castle is not like your pack territory. The rules are different. Stricter. And the king himself, well, he has particular standards. What kind of standards? The kind that don't tolerate weakness, incompetence, or disloyalty. Vale leaned back against the carriage seat. But you seem intelligent enough. Keep your head down, do your work, and you'll be fine. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The severed mate bond still ached in my chest, a constant reminder of what I'd lost, or what I'd never had. The pain made it hard to focus, hard to care about whatever awaited me at the castle. The carriage rolled on through unfamiliar territory, taking me further from everything I'd known, further from the pack that had rejected me, the family that had abandoned me, the life that had never wanted me in the first place. I pressed my hand against the window, watching the landscape change from forest to rolling hills to distant mountains. Somewhere beyond those mountains was the Alpha King's castle, and my new life as tribute, a servant in a stranger's house. At least, I told myself. It had to be better than being a ghost in my own home. The carriage hit a bump, and I caught my reflection in the window, glass-veiled, anonymous, already forgotten. I closed my eyes and tried to imagine a future that didn't hurt. I couldn't. Chapter 3. The King in Silver. We traveled for 3 days. Chancellor Vale proved to be a surprisingly tolerable companion. He didn't press me for conversation when I fell silent, didn't ask invasive questions about my scars or my rejection, and didn't treat me like a burden. He simply existed across from me in the carriage, reading reports and making notes, occasionally pointing out landmarks as we passed. Those are the Thornspire Mountains, he said on the second day, gesturing toward jagged peaks in the distance. The king's castle sits at their base. You'll see it tomorrow. I looked at the mountains, dark, imposing, crowned with snow even in late spring. They looked like the kind of place where fairy tales went to die. What's the king like? I asked, surprising myself. I'd been trying not to think about him, about the man who now owned my service, my time, my future. Vale considered the question carefully. Complicated. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I can give. He set down his papers, his expression thoughtful. The Alpha King is many things to many people. A warrior to his enemies, a strategist to his advisors, a symbol to his subjects. He paused. But who he is beneath all that, I'm not certain anyone knows. Is he cruel? He can be. When cruelty serves a purpose. And when it doesn't, then he's something else entirely. Vale picked up his papers again, signaling the end of the conversation. You'll form your own opinion soon enough. I spent the rest of the day staring out the window, trying to imagine what kind of man inspired such careful non-answers from his own advisors. We arrived at the castle on the 4th morning, just as the sun was rising over the Thornspire Mountains. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen, and the most terrifying. The castle rose from the mountainside like it had been carved from the rock itself, all white marble and soaring towers, with walls that caught the morning light and made the entire structure glow. Gardens surrounded it, lush and green even this high in the mountains. Fountains sparkled in the courtyards. Everything about it screamed wealth, power, permanence. But there was something else too. Something in the way the shadows pooled in certain corners, the way certain windows remained dark even as the sun rose. A sense that beneath all that beauty was something far less pretty. Impressive, isn't it? Vale said as our carriage rolled through the main gates. It's enormous. The king rules over 73 packs across 5 territories. He needs the space. Vale gathered his things as we came to a stop. We'll enter through the main hall. Protocol requires all newcomers to be formally received. Then you'll be taken to the staff quarters for processing. Processing? Registration, room assignment, uniform fitting, orientation. He opened the carriage door. Standard procedure for all new household members. I followed him out of the carriage and immediately felt small. The courtyard alone was larger than my entire pack's territory. Servants moved efficiently through the space, carrying supplies, tending gardens, their movements coordinated like a dance. Everyone seemed to know exactly where they belonged, exactly what they were doing. I had never felt more out of place. Vale led me through a set of massive bronze doors into the main hall, and I had to stop myself from gasping. The ceiling soared at least 40 feet high, supported by marble columns carved with intricate wolf imagery. Tapestries depicting famous battles hung along the walls. A grand staircase curved upward toward the private floors, its railing inlaid with gold. Everything was polished, pristine, perfect. This way, Vale said, guiding me toward a side corridor. The receiving room is Chancellor Valet. The voice came from the staircase, deep, commanding, with an edge that made everyone in the hall immediately straighten. I looked up and felt my breath catch. The man descending the stairs was tall, taller even than the stranger I'd met in the forest. He moved with lethal grace, each step deliberate and controlled. His dark hair was slightly longer than protocol probably dictated, falling just past his collar. He wore formal court attire, all black and silver, with the royal crest embroidered over his heart. But it was his eyes that stopped me cold. Pale silver, like moonlight on water, exactly like. "You're early," the man said, reaching the bottom of the stairs. "I wasn't expecting you until this afternoon." "We made good time, Your Majesty," Vale said, bowing deeply. "Your Majesty." This was the Alpha King. This was the stranger from the forest. I stood frozen as he turned his attention to me, those silver eyes scanning my face or what he could see of it beneath the veil. His expression didn't change, gave nothing away. If he recognized me, he showed no sign of it. "Is this the tribute from Bernard Pack?" "Yes, Your Majesty, Velma Bernard, Beta Tobias's daughter." The king's gaze didn't waver from my veiled face. "Remove it." My hands moved to the veil's pins before my brain could catch up. I'd spent so long obeying commands, making myself compliant, that the instinct was automatic. But Vale stepped forward. "Your Majesty, perhaps we should conduct the formal reception first? There are protocols." "Remove it," the king repeated, his voice quiet but absolute. I pulled the pins free and let the veil fall away. The king stared at my scarred face with the same intensity he'd had in the forest. But now there was something else in his expression. Something I couldn't read. The mark ran from my temple to my jaw, the tissue thick and twisted, pulling my features into their permanent asymmetry. Servants had stopped working. Guards along the walls had gone still. Everyone was watching, waiting for the king's reaction. He took a step closer, and I forced myself not to flinch. Then another step. He was close enough now that I could see the faint scars on his own hands, marks that spoke of violence and survival. Close enough that I could smell cedar and cold mountain air. Close enough that when he spoke, only I could hear him. "You're my mate." The words were so quiet, so matter-of-fact, that for a moment I thought I'd imagined them. Then the world tilted sideways. The bond I'd felt severed 4 days ago suddenly roared back to life, but different this time, stronger. Not the fragile connection I'd had with Darius, but something ancient and overwhelming, like a forest fire or an avalanche. It slammed into me with enough force to make my knees buckle. The king caught me before I hit the ground, his hands steady on my arms. I couldn't form words, couldn't think past the bond screaming in my head, trying to wrap around every piece of me, trying to pull me toward him with a force that felt inevitable as gravity. "Breathe," he said, still quiet, still only for me. "I know it's intense. Breathe through it." "You knew." The accusation came out strangled. "In the forest. You knew then." "I suspected." "And you didn't say anything? Would you have believed me?" His silver eyes held mine, and I saw the truth there. He was right. I would have thought he was mocking me, playing some cruel game. I had to be certain. Your Majesty? Vale sounded concerned now. Should I call the healer? No. The king helped me stand, his hands gentling but not releasing me. She's fine. Just overwhelmed. He looked around at the gathered servants, his expression hardening. Everyone back to work. Now. The hall emptied in seconds. When it was just the three of us, me, the king, and Vale the king finally stepped back, creating space between us. But the bond stretched taut, protesting the distance. This changes things, he said to Vale, his tone shifting back to business. Cancel the standard processing. She'll need different quarters. Your Majesty, with respect, perhaps we should discuss this privately before making any hasty. She's my mate, Vale. What's there to discuss? Protocol, Your Majesty. Procedure. The implications of, are you questioning my judgment? Vale went very still. Never, Your Majesty. I'm simply advising caution. Noted. The king turned back to me, and his expression softened slightly. What's your name? You already know my name. I know what your file says. I want to hear it from you. Velma. My voice was steadier than I expected. Velma Bernard. Velma. He said it like he was testing how it felt. I'm Columbus George, Alpha King of the Northern Territories. And apparently, we're fated mates. I was already rejected once. I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. 4 days ago, by my first mate. So, if this is some kind of cosmic joke, it's not. Columbus's voice was firm. What you felt before wasn't a true mate bond. It was potential. A possibility. This, he gestured between us, is the real thing. How do you know? Because I've been alive for 137 years, and I've never felt anything like this before. He took a careful step toward me, moving slowly like he was approaching something wild. Because the moment I saw you in that forest, every instinct I have screamed that you were mine. Because right now, it's taking everything I have not to lock every door in this castle to keep you here. The honesty in his words was almost worse than rejection would have been. Because rejection I understood. Rejection made sense. This a king claiming a scarred, broken, worthless girl as his mate. This was impossible. You don't want me, I said. You can't. Look at me. I am looking at you. Then you can see why this won't work. I can't shift. I'm barren. I'm mine. He said it with such finality that it silenced everything else. You're mine, Velma, and I don't care about the rest. I wanted to believe him. Wanted it so badly it hurt worse than the severed bond had. But I'd spent 19 years learning that wanting something didn't make it true. What if you change your mind? I whispered. What if you wake up tomorrow and realize you made a mistake? Then I'll have made a mistake. Columbus moved closer still, until we were nearly touching. But I won't. I don't make mistakes about things that matter. And I matter? You matter. The bond pulsed between us, warm and insistent, trying to pull us together. I felt his wolf reaching for me, felt something in my own chest, something I'd always thought was broken, reaching back. I don't know how to do this, I admitted. Neither do I. A small smile tugged at his mouth. We'll figure it out together. Vale cleared his throat delicately. Your Majesty, if I might suggest, the young lady has been traveling for days. Perhaps she should rest, have time to adjust before any decisions are made. Columbus's jaw tightened, but he nodded. You're right. He looked at me. You'll stay in the guest wing for now. Private quarters, your own space. No pressure, no expectations, just time to process. And then we talk, really talk. About what this means, what you want, what happens next. He reached out like he wanted to touch my face, then seemed to think better of it, and dropped his hand. I won't force you into anything, Velma. The mate bond doesn't work that way, not really. You have to choose it. Choose me. Even though Don't finish that sentence. His voice turned hard. Don't list your flaws like they're reasons I shouldn't want you. I've seen what you look like. I know you can't shift. I heard about your rejection. And none of it changes the fact that you're my mate. I stared at him, searching for deception, for cruelty, for the trap I knew had to be hidden somewhere in his words. But all I found was certainty, and something that looked almost like desperation. "Okay," I said finally. "Okay? I'll stay. In the guest quarters, for now." I pulled my veil back over my face, needing the barrier between me and his intense gaze. "But I'm not promising anything beyond that. I'm not asking you to." Columbus turned to Vale. "Take her to the Rose Suite. Make sure she has everything she needs. And Vale? No one disturbs her without my permission. No one." "Yes, Your Majesty." Columbus looked at me one last time, and I felt the bond stretch between us like a living thing, reluctant to let him go. "Welcome to your new home, Velma Bernard," he said quietly. "I hope you'll eventually decide to stay." Then, he turned and walked back up the grand staircase, leaving me standing in the empty hall with Vale and a bond I didn't know how to handle. "Well," Vale said, after a long moment, "that was unexpected." "Which part?" I asked weakly. "The part where the king is my mate, or the part where he actually seems to want me?" "Both, honestly." Vale gestured toward a different corridor. "Come, the Rose Suite is this way. We'll get you settled, and then we'll see what tomorrow brings." I followed him through the marble halls, past tapestries and treasures, through a castle that was now supposedly my home. Behind us, I could feel Columbus's presence like a flame at my back. Warm, dangerous, impossible to ignore. I'd come here expecting to be a servant, a piece of tribute traded away by my pack. Instead, I'd found my mate, again, and this time, he claimed he wanted to keep me. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so I did neither. I just walked through the beautiful castle with its dark corners, following Vale toward whatever came next, and tried not to think about how badly I wanted Columbus's words to be true. How badly I wanted, just once, to be someone's choice instead of their burden. Chapter 4. When Words Mean Everything. The Rose Suite was more beautiful than any place I'd ever been allowed to sleep. 3 rooms. A bedroom with a 4-poster bed, draped in soft linens, a sitting area with plush chairs arranged near a fireplace, and a private bathing room with a tub large enough to drown in. Windows overlooked the castle gardens, where late spring flowers bloomed in riots of color. Everything smelled like lavender and beeswax and expensive things. I stood in the center of the bedroom, still wearing my travel-stained clothes, and felt like an imposter. "The staff will bring fresh clothing within the hour," Vale said from the doorway. "Meals can be taken here or in the main dining hall, whichever you prefer. If you need anything, pull that cord." He pointed to an embroidered rope near the bed, "and someone will come." "Thank you," I said quietly. Vale hesitated, then stepped fully into the room. "Miss Bernard Velma, I feel I should offer some advice. About the king? About everything." He closed the door behind him, his expression serious. "You've been thrust into an extraordinary situation. The king doesn't typically, that is, His Majesty is not known for impulsive decisions, especially regarding personal matters. You're saying he's serious about the mate bond. I'm saying he believes he's serious, but belief and reality don't always align, particularly in matters of the heart." Vale moved to the window, looking out at the gardens. "The king has responsibilities, pressures, expectations that would crush most people. A mate complicates things, changes the political landscape, creates vulnerabilities. So you think he'll change his mind? I think he'll be encouraged to reconsider by people who believe they know what's best for him." Vale turned back to me. "There are factions at court who have been trying to arrange a political marriage for years. Noble daughters, powerful families, strategic alliances. Your arrival, your bond with the king, it disrupts years of careful planning. I didn't ask for any of this. I know. Which is why I'm warning you now, be careful who you trust. The court is not kind to those it sees as threats." His expression softened slightly. "But for what it's worth, I hope you stay. The king has been alone for a very long time. Perhaps too long." Before I could respond, there was a knock at the door. Vale opened it to reveal 2 young women carrying armfuls of clothing and a third pushing a cart laden with food. "Your provisions, miss," one of them said, curtsying quickly. "Compliments of His Majesty." They bustled in, hanging clothes in the wardrobe, arranging food on the table in the sitting area, moving with practiced efficiency. I caught fragments of their whispered conversation. Can't believe the king actually claimed her. But did you see her face? Poor thing. Must be powerful magic if he can look past that. Vale cleared his throat sharply, and they fell silent. That will be all, he said. Miss Bernard requires privacy. They curtsied again and hurried out, leaving me alone with Vale and the sudden urge to crawl under the bed and hide. I apologize for their rudeness, Vale said stiffly. They'll be disciplined. Don't. I moved to the window, keeping my back to him. They're not wrong. I am what I am. People stare. People whisper. I'm used to it. That doesn't make it acceptable. No. But punishing them won't change what they think. I traced a finger along the window frame, feeling the smoothness of the polished wood. Can I ask you something? Of course. When the king saw me in the forest, before he knew who I was, did he seem disgusted? Horrified? Vale was quiet for a long moment. He seemed intrigued. Intrigued. His exact words when he returned were, I met someone interesting today. Vale moved toward the door. That's high praise from a man who finds most people tedious. After he left, I stood at the window and watched the sun set over the gardens, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. 4 days ago, I'd been rejected by my mate and exiled from my pack. Now I was standing in a castle suite, claimed by an alpha king who insisted I was his true mate. It didn't feel real. It felt like one of the stories I used to tell myself, the kind where the broken girl gets rescued and everything turns out perfect. But life wasn't a story. And perfect endings didn't exist for people like me. I didn't sleep that night. I tried. I bathed in the enormous tub, put on one of the soft nightgowns the servants had left, climbed into the impossibly comfortable bed. But every time I closed my eyes, I felt the mate bond humming in my chest, warm and persistent, reminding me that somewhere in this castle was a man who claimed to want me. Around midnight, I gave up and moved to the sitting area, wrapping myself in a blanket and settling into one of the chairs near the cold fireplace. The castle was quiet at this hour, just the distant sound of guards changing shifts and the whisper of wind against stone. I was so focused on my own thoughts that I didn't hear the door open. Can't sleep either? I jumped, the blanket falling away as I spun toward the voice. Columbus stood in the doorway, still dressed in his formal attire but with his jacket removed and his shirt sleeves rolled up. He looked tired, shadows under those silver eyes, his hair slightly disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it. You shouldn't be here, I said, pulling the blanket back around myself. It's not proper. I'm the king. I make the rules about what's proper. But he didn't come closer, just leaned against the door frame. I could feel you. Through the bond. Your restlessness. Your fear. I'm not afraid. Liar, he said it gently, without judgment. You're terrified. I can feel that too. I wanted to deny it. But what was the point? If the bond let him sense my emotions, then pretending was useless. What do you want? I asked instead. To talk. To help you understand that this isn't a trick or a trap. He pushed away from the doorframe but didn't enter the room. May I come in? The fact that he asked, that he waited for permission to enter a room in his own castle, made something in my chest tighten. Yes. Columbus crossed to the other chair, moving slowly, deliberately. He sat down with the kind of careful grace that spoke of contained violence, of power held in check. This close, I could see the scars on his hands more clearly, old wounds, long healed, marks of battles I couldn't imagine. I know you don't trust me, he said. I know you have every reason not to. But I need you to understand something. I've been alone for a very long time. Over a century. I've met thousands of people, ruled over hundreds of thousands more, and never once felt even a whisper of a mate bond. Until you. He leaned back in the chair, his eyes never leaving my face. When I saw you in that forest, I knew. Before I knew your name, before I knew anything about you, I knew. And it scared the hell out of me. Why would it scare you? Because a mate is a vulnerability, a weakness enemies can exploit, a distraction from duty. His jaw tightened, and because I knew that whoever you were, wherever you came from, your life was about to become infinitely more complicated. It's already complicated, I said quietly. I know. Vale told me about the rejection ceremony, about your pack. Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. About how your own father traded you away like you were worthless. I am worthless. To them. The words came easier than they should have. I can't shift. I'm barren. I'm going to finish that sentence differently this time, Columbus interrupted. You're here, you're mine, and you're worth more than your entire pack combined. You don't know that. I know you had the courage to ask your mate why he was rejecting you instead of accepting it quietly. I know you chose to come here rather than fight a losing battle. I know you're sitting here talking to me instead of running, even though every instinct you have is probably screaming at you to protect yourself. He leaned forward slightly. That's not worthlessness, Velma. That's strength. I didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to process someone seeing strength where I'd only ever seen failure. I have a question for you, I said finally. A riddle, actually. Columbus's expression shifted, interest sharpening his features. A riddle? If you can answer it, I'll believe you're serious about this. About me. I pulled the blanket tighter, using it like armor. But if you can't, then I want you to release me from the mate bond. Let me go back to being what I was supposed to be, tribute, a servant, nothing more. That's a dangerous wager. Those are my terms. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Ask your riddle. I thought about the riddle I'd been composing in my head since childhood, the one I'd told myself over and over in the dark times, the one that had no easy answer, because it was never meant to be answered, just pondered, turned over, examined from every angle. I am given but never taken, I said slowly. I can be broken, yet I bind. I am invisible, yet I change everything. I am freely offered, yet worth more than gold. What am I? Columbus went very still. His silver eyes locked onto mine, and I watched him think. Watched the riddle turn over in his mind. That's not a fair riddle, he said finally. Why not? Because the answer depends on perspective, on what you value, on what you've lost. He stood, moving to the window, his back to me. If I answer it one way, I reveal something about myself. If I answer it another way, I might insult you. And if I refuse to answer entirely, I lose the wager. So you can't answer it. I didn't say that. He turned back to me, and something in his expression made my breath catch. I said it's not fair. Because you've crafted a riddle that forces me to be vulnerable, to show you exactly what I think this mate bond means, and I suspect that's precisely what you intended. He was right. I'd chosen a riddle with no single correct answer, one that would reveal more about the person answering than the riddle itself. So? I challenged. What's your answer? Columbus crossed back to me, kneeling beside my chair so we were eye level. This close, I could see flecks of darker silver in his eyes, could feel the heat of his body, could sense his wolf just beneath his skin. I don't know, he said quietly. I don't know the answer to your riddle. Not yet. My heart sank. Then you lose the wager. No. He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and took my hand. His skin was warm, calloused, gentle. I said, I don't know the answer yet, because the answer to your riddle is something I have to show you, not tell you. Something that takes time and trust and patience. That's not how riddles work. Then we'll change the rules. His thumb traced small circles on the back of my hand. Give me time, Velma. Let me prove that I'm serious. Let me show you what the answer to your riddle is, day by day, choice by choice. And if I fail, if you decide I'm lying or wrong or not worth the risk, then I'll release you from the bond. I'll let you go. You'd really do that? I'd hate it. It would probably destroy me, but yes, I'd do it. His grip on my hand tightened slightly, because forcing you to stay, keeping you here against your will, that's not a mate bond. That's a prison, and I won't be your jailer. The sincerity in his voice, the steadiness of his gaze, the warmth of his hand in mine, it was all too much. Too overwhelming. Too close to the thing I'd wanted my entire life and never dared to hope for. How long? I whispered. How long do I have to decide? As long as you need. Columbus stood, releasing my hand with obvious reluctance. Days. Weeks. Months. I'm not going anywhere. And neither are you, unless you choose to leave. He moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, he said, without turning around. I think your riddle is beautiful. Whoever taught you to think like that? To craft questions instead of accepting easy answers, they gave you a gift. No one taught me. I taught myself. I pulled the blanket tighter, suddenly cold without his hand in mine. Stories were the only friends I had growing up. Then I'm grateful to those stories. They made you into someone worth finding. He looked back at me, and the expression on his face was so open, so genuine, that it hurt to look at. Sleep well, Velma. I'll see you tomorrow. After he left, I sat in the chair for a long time, staring at the hand he'd held, feeling the lingering warmth of his touch. A riddle with no answer. A mate who claimed to want me. A bond that felt too real to be true. I thought about his response, about how he'd turned my test back on me, making it about time and proof rather than words. It was clever. It was frustrating. It was exactly what someone who genuinely cared would do, and that terrified me more than anything else. I must have fallen asleep in the chair eventually, because I woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and a soft knock at the door. Miss Bernard? A woman's voice, older, kind. His Majesty asked me to attend to you this morning. May I come in? I pulled my veil on quickly, automatic, instinctive, and called out permission. The woman who entered was perhaps 50, with gray-streaked hair and warm brown eyes. She carried a tray of food and wore the formal dress of senior household staff. I'm Margot, the head housekeeper, she said, setting the tray down. His Majesty wanted to ensure you were comfortable and had everything you needed. I'm fine, thank you. He also asked me to show you the library, if you were interested. Margot's smile was genuine. He mentioned you enjoyed books. The library. Columbus had remembered that small detail from when Chancellor Vale had asked about my skills. I'd like that, I said carefully. Excellent. Eat your breakfast, dress, and I'll return in an hour. She moved toward the door, then paused. Miss Bernard? If I may, the king rarely takes personal interest in anyone. The fact that he's asking about your comfort, your preferences, your interests, it means something. Please don't dismiss it lightly. After she left, I picked at the breakfast, fresh bread, honey, fruit I didn't recognize, and thought about riddles, and mates and kings who knelt beside chairs instead of demanding obedience. I thought about answers that took time to reveal themselves, and I wondered if maybe, just maybe, I'd finally found someone willing to wait for me to trust them, even if I didn't trust myself. Chapter 5. Building Something Real. The library was beyond anything I could have imagined. It occupied an entire wing of the castle, 3 stories of floor-to-ceiling shelves connected by spiral staircases and narrow walkways. Sunlight poured through stained glass windows, casting colored patterns across the polished wood floors. The smell of old paper and leather bindings filled the air, familiar and comforting in a way nothing else in this castle had been. His Majesty had this wing renovated 10 years ago, Margot said, leading me through the main floor. He's quite passionate about preserving knowledge. Books come here from all over the territories, histories, sciences, stories, even banned texts that would be burned elsewhere. I ran my fingers along the spines as we passed, reading titles in languages I recognized and some I didn't, medical texts, military strategies, collections of folk tales, philosophy, magic theory, everything and nothing, all contained in one space. You're welcome to use the library whenever you wish, Margot continued. His Majesty specifically requested that you have unrestricted access. Why would he do that? Perhaps you should ask him yourself. She gestured toward the far end of the library, where a reading area had been set up near the windows. Deep chairs, soft lighting, a table perfect for spreading out books and papers. And sitting in one of the chairs, reading what looked like a military report, was Columbus. He looked up as we approached, and something in his expression softened when he saw me. Margot, thank you, he said. That will be all. The housekeeper curtsied and left, her footsteps fading into the stacks. Columbus set aside his report and stood. Today he was dressed more casually, still formal by most standards. But his collar was open, his sleeves rolled up again. He looked less like an alpha king and more like a man who'd been working through paperwork for too many hours. "What do you think?" he asked, gesturing to the library. "It's beautiful. I hoped you'd like it." He moved to one of the shelves, pulling down a leather-bound volume. "This is my favorite section, collected fairy tales from the old world. Stories about shifters and humans, about magic before the territories were unified. Some of them are thousands of years old." He handed me the book, and I opened it carefully. The pages were fragile, the ink faded but still legible. Illustrations decorated the margins, wolves and moons, forests and castles, all rendered in intricate detail. "I didn't know books this old still existed," I said softly. "Most don't. These are some of the last surviving copies." Columbus moved closer, looking over my shoulder at the open page. "That one's about the origin of the mate bond. How the moon goddess supposedly created it to give her children shifters a chance at unconditional love in a world that was otherwise brutal and unforgiving." I read the elegant script. The story of how the goddess had wept at her children's loneliness and blessed them with the ability to find their perfect match, their other half, their fated mate. "Do you believe it?" I asked. "That the mate bond is a gift from the goddess?" "I believe it's real. Whether it's divine intervention or biology or something else entirely, does it matter?" He leaned against the bookshelf, studying me. "You feel it too, don't you? The pull, the awareness, the way everything in you wants to be closer to me, even when your mind is telling you to run." I couldn't deny it. The bond had been a constant presence since yesterday, humming beneath my skin, making me hyper-aware of exactly where Columbus was in any room, how far away, whether he was looking at me. "It's overwhelming," I admitted. "I know. For me too." He crossed his arms, a gesture that somehow made him look more human, less kingly. "I've been thinking about your riddle all night. Have you figured out the answer?" "No, but I think I've figured out why you asked it." He pushed away from the bookshelf, moving to the windows. "You wanted to see if I could understand you. If I could see past the obvious answers to what you were really asking. If I was someone worth trusting with the truth." He was right. The riddle had been a test, but not the kind he thought he was taking. I'd wanted to see if he would try to impress me with false wisdom, or admit his uncertainty honestly. He'd done the latter. "You said you'd show me the answer over time," I said. "What did you mean?" "Come here." I hesitated, then moved to stand beside him at the window. From here, we could see the training yards below, where warriors were running drills. Beyond that, the gardens. Beyond that, the mountains. "I've ruled for 87 years, Columbus said quietly. "Since I was 50, and my father died in battle. In that time, I've fought 17 wars, negotiated peace with 32 territories, survived 11 assassination attempts, and outlived everyone I grew up with. I've done things I'm proud of and things that haunt me. I've been called a hero and a tyrant, sometimes by the same people in the same breath. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to understand who you've been bonded to. I'm not a fairy tale prince. I'm not going to sweep you off your feet and make all your problems disappear." He turned to face me, his silver eyes intense. "I'm 137 years old, Velma. I'm tired. I'm scarred, not on the outside like you, but inside where no one can see. And I've spent most of my life believing I would never find a mate, that I would rule alone and die alone, and that was just how it had to be. And then you found me, and then I found you." His hand lifted like he wanted to touch my face, then dropped. "A girl wearing a veil in a forest, who looked at me like I was just another stranger, instead of the most powerful man in 5 territories. Who asked me why I was still there instead of demanding I leave. Who made me curious instead of bored for the first time in decades. I didn't do anything special. You were yourself. That was special enough." He stepped back, creating space between us again. "I don't know how to answer your riddle yet because I don't know what you need from me. Trust? Patience? Proof that I won't reject you like your pack did? I'm willing to give you all of that and more. But I need you to tell me what you want." The question hung in the air between us. What did I want? I'd spent so long just trying to survive, to take up as little space as possible, to not be a burden, that I'd never considered what I actually wanted for myself. I started, then stopped. "I don't know." "That's okay. You don't have to know yet. Columbus moved toward the door, then paused. Use the library whenever you want. Read anything that interests you, and if you need me for any reason, tell any of the staff. They'll find me. Where are you going? I have meetings all afternoon. Border disputes, trade negotiations, the usual tedium of ruling. He smiled slightly. But I'll be thinking about you the entire time. After he left, I stood at the window for a long time, watching the warriors train, trying to process everything he'd said. He was right about one thing: the bond was overwhelming. I could feel him even now, somewhere in the castle, a warm presence at the edge of my consciousness. It should have felt invasive, suffocating. Instead, it felt like having a safety line in the dark. I turned back to the library, to the thousands of books waiting to be explored, and felt something in my chest loosen slightly. Maybe I didn't have to have all the answers right now. Maybe it was okay to just be here, to read and think and figure out what I wanted, without the pressure of judgment or rejection hanging over my head. For the first time since the rejection ceremony, I felt like I could breathe. I spent the rest of the day lost in the library. I started with the fairy tale collection, reading stories about mate bonds and magic, about curses broken and love discovered. Then, I moved to the histories, learning about how the territories had been unified, about the wars Columbus had mentioned, about the complex politics that governed shifter society. The more I read, the more I understood just how impossible my situation was. The Alpha King was supposed to mate with someone of equal status, a powerful Alpha's daughter, a woman with a strong wolf, someone who could stand beside him as an equal, and produce strong heirs to continue his bloodline. I was none of those things. I was the broken daughter of a beta, cursed and barren, unable to shift. By every measure that mattered in shifter society, I was the worst possible choice for a king's mate, and yet Columbus claimed to want me anyway. I was still puzzling over it when I heard footsteps approaching. Miss Bernard? I looked up to find Chancellor Vale standing at the end of my row of shelves, his expression carefully neutral. Chancellor, is something wrong? Not wrong, precisely. But I thought you should be aware there's been talk at court. About you. About your bond with the king. My stomach dropped. What kind of talk? The predictable kind. Questions about your background, your lineage, your fitness to be the king's mate. He moved closer, lowering his voice. There are several noble families who had been positioning their daughters for consideration. Your arrival has disrupted their plans. I didn't ask for any of this. I know, but that won't protect you from their machinations. Vale glanced around, ensuring we were alone. Lady Casey in particular has been quite vocal in her displeasure. Her daughter Cassia has been the leading candidate for a political match with the king for the past 5 years. What does she want? What all ambitious nobles want: power, status, a connection to the throne. His expression turned grave. I'm telling you this not to frighten you, but to prepare you. The king can protect you from direct threats, but court politics are more subtle. Be careful who you trust. Be careful what you say. And for the goddess's sake, don't go anywhere alone until you understand the landscape better. You're telling me I'm in danger. I'm telling you that you're a disruption to the established order, and disruptions are rarely welcomed gracefully. He straightened. But the king has made his position clear. Anyone who threatens you threatens him. That should keep the more obvious dangers at bay. After Vale left, I sat among the books and felt the temporary peace I'd found evaporate. I'd been naive to think coming here would be simple, that being Columbus's mate would solve my problems rather than create new ones. I was still a liability, still a weakness, still cursed, and now I was endangering a king. That evening, I was summoned to dinner, not in the main dining hall where the court ate, but to the king's private chambers. The invitation came through Margot, delivered with her usual kindness but with an undercurrent of significance I couldn't quite read. Should I be nervous? I asked as she led me through corridors I hadn't seen before. The king simply wishes to dine with you privately. It's not unusual for him to prefer intimate dinners when he's getting to know someone. She paused outside a set of carved wooden doors. But Miss Bernard, he wouldn't have invited you if he didn't want you here. Remember that. She knocked once, then opened the door. The king's private chambers were smaller than I expected. though still luxurious. A sitting area with comfortable furniture, shelves lined with books and maps. A dining table set for 2 near windows that overlooked the mountains. Everything spoke of someone who valued function over ostentation, comfort over display. Columbus stood near the windows, still dressed in formal attire from his meetings, but his jacket was draped over a chair, and his collar was open again. "Velma," he said, and the way he said my name, warm, genuinely pleased, made something flutter in my chest. "Thank you for coming." "Did I have a choice?" "Always." He gestured to the table. "But I'm glad you chose to be here." We sat, and servants appeared with food: roasted meat, fresh vegetables, bread that smelled like heaven. They moved efficiently, setting out dishes and pouring wine before disappearing again. "I heard you spent the day in the library," Columbus said, serving himself food. "Did you find anything interesting? Histories, politics, stories?" I picked at my own plate, suddenly nervous. "I learned that I'm probably the worst possible choice for a king's mate." His fork paused halfway to his mouth. "Who told you that?" "No one. I read it. All the books about royal mate bonds talk about political advantages, bloodline strength, territorial alliances. I'm none of those things. You're my mate. That's the only thing that matters." "Is it?" I set down my own fork. "Chancellor Vale told me about Lady Casey, about her daughter, about all the noble families who were expecting you to choose someone appropriate." "Appropriate?" Columbus's voice took on an edge. "You mean someone who fits their definition of what a queen should be? Someone who can shift? Someone who can give you heirs? Someone who doesn't have to wear a veil in public because her face frightens people?" "Stop." He set down his fork with more force than necessary. "Stop listing reasons why you think you're not good enough. You sound like them, like everyone who's ever told you that you're less than what you are. Because they're not wrong. They are wrong." He stood abruptly, moving to the windows, his back to me. "I've spent 87 years being told what's appropriate. Who I should ally with, how I should rule, what's expected of an alpha king, and I've done it. I've played the game, made the political matches for others, sacrificed personal desires for the good of the territories." He turned back to me, and the intensity in his silver eyes was almost frightening. "And I'm done. I'm done being appropriate. I'm done letting other people dictate my choices. I found my mate. You, and I don't care if you can't shift, or if you're barren, or if every noble family in the territories disapproves. You're mine, and I'm keeping you." The possessiveness in his voice should have bothered me, should have made me feel like property, like an object claimed and owned. Instead, it made me feel wanted, chosen, seen. "What if I hurt you?" I asked quietly. "What if being bonded to me damages your rule? Your reputation? Then I'll deal with it." He moved back to the table, but didn't sit. "Velma, I didn't ask for this bond. I didn't plan for you. But now that I have you, I'm not letting go. Not for politics, not for propriety, not for anything. You barely know me. I know enough." He knelt beside my chair, just like he had last night, bringing us eye level. "I know you're brave enough to challenge your mate in front of your entire pack. I know you're smart enough to craft riddles that have no easy answers. I know you've survived things that would have broken most people. And I know that when I look at you, I see someone worth fighting for. Even with the veil? Especially with the veil." His hand reached up slowly, giving me time to pull away. "Because you wear it to protect yourself, not because you believe you should be hidden. And I want to know the woman beneath it. All of her. Scars and all." His fingers found the edge of the veil, and this time I didn't stop him when he pulled it away. He studied my face with the same intensity he'd shown that first day, his eyes tracing the path of my scars, the twisted tissue, the pulled features. But there was no disgust in his expression, no horror, just curiosity and something that looked almost like tenderness. "Tell me how it happened," he said softly. "I was born this way. The healers said it looked like burns, but my skin has always been like this. And your pack called you cursed, among other things." His jaw tightened. "Your pack was wrong. There's nothing cursed about you. You don't know that." "Yes, I do. His thumb traced the edge of my scar so gently I barely felt it and my breath caught. Because if you were truly cursed, the mate bond wouldn't exist. The moon goddess doesn't bond cursed souls. She only bonds those who are meant to find each other. That's just a story. Maybe. But I choose to believe it. He stood, releasing my face with obvious reluctance. And I choose to believe that you and I were meant to find each other. Even if it took a century and a half. Even if the circumstances are complicated. Even if everyone thinks it's inappropriate. I sat there, my face bare, my heart racing, and tried to remember why I shouldn't trust him. But all I could think about was how his touch had been gentle. How his eyes had held no judgment. How he'd called my scars beautiful in his own way. By refusing to look away. I need time, I said finally, to process this, to understand what it means, to figure out if I can do this. Take all the time you need. Columbus returned to his seat, but his eyes never left my face. I told you I'm not going anywhere, and neither are you, unless you choose to leave. We finished dinner in comfortable silence, and when I finally returned to my room hours later, I caught my reflection in the mirror without the veil. For the first time in my life, I didn't immediately look away. Instead, I studied my scarred face, and wondered if maybe, just maybe, Columbus was right. Maybe I wasn't cursed. Maybe I was just waiting for someone who could see past the scars to whatever lay beneath. Chapter 6. The Cruel Revelation. 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks of slowly learning to exist in a castle where I didn't have to hide, where I could read in the library without fear of being mocked, where meals appeared when I was hungry and no one whispered about me being a burden, where the Alpha King himself sought out my company almost daily. Columbus didn't push, didn't demand. He simply showed up. In the library, reading quietly in the chair beside mine. In the gardens, walking alongside me as I explored the grounds. At dinner, asking about my day, with genuine interest. He was there, constant and patient, letting the mate bond strengthen naturally between us. And it was working. I could feel myself softening toward him, feel the walls I'd built around my heart beginning to crack. He made me laugh with his dry observations about court politics. He challenged my ideas about history and magic. He listened when I talked about the stories I loved, the ones I used to tell myself in the dark. He made me feel seen in a way I'd never experienced before. But there was something he wasn't telling me, something I felt in the careful way he deflected certain questions, the way he'd grow distant when I asked about his past, about the curse I'd seen mentioned in some of the older texts. "Your Majesty has a visitor," Margot announced one morning as I was preparing to head to the library. I'd stopped wearing the veil inside the castle walls. Not everywhere I still wore it around most of the staff, around anyone I didn't know. But in the library, in my rooms, in the private spaces where it was just Columbus and me, I'd learned to let my face show. It felt like freedom and terror in equal measure. "Who?" I asked. "Lady Casey and her daughter Cassia. They've requested an audience with you specifically." My stomach dropped. Chancellor Vale's warnings echoed in my head. The noble families, the political machinations, the danger of being seen as a disruption. Do I have to see them? "You're the king's mate." Margot's expression was kind but firm. "Eventually, you'll have to face the court. Better to do it on your own terms than theirs." She was right. I couldn't hide forever. I pulled on my veil, took a steadying breath, and followed Margot to one of the formal receiving rooms. Lady Casey was exactly what I expected, impeccably dressed, coldly beautiful, with calculating eyes that assessed me the moment I entered. Her daughter Cassia stood beside her, younger but cut from the same cloth, beautiful in the way that noble daughters were supposed to be, perfect features, graceful posture, everything about her screaming breeding and status, everything I wasn't. "Miss Bernard," Lady Casey said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "How kind of you to receive us." "Lady Casey, Lady Cassia." I took the seat across from them, grateful for the veil hiding my expression. "To what do I owe the pleasure? We thought it was time we met. After all, you've been residing in the castle for nearly a month now, and we've heard so many interesting things about you." The pause before interesting was deliberate. A small cruelty, testing my reaction. "I've kept to myself mostly," I said carefully, learning my way around. How modest. Cassia spoke for the first time, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. Though we've heard you've been spending quite a lot of time with His Majesty. Private dinners, long walks. How intimate. The king has been generous with his time. Has he told you why? Lady Casey leaned forward slightly. Why he's being so generous. Why he's claimed you as his mate. Because we're bonded. Are you certain that's all it is? She exchanged a glance with her daughter. You see, Miss Bernard, there are things about His Majesty that perhaps you don't know. Things that might explain his sudden interest in you. My hands clenched in my lap. What things? There's a curse, Cassia said, her tone conspiratorial, like she was sharing gossip rather than delivering a weapon. One that's been on the royal bloodline for generations. His Majesty is afflicted with it. What kind of curse? The kind that transforms him into something monstrous. Lady Casey's smile widened. Surely you've noticed how he disappears sometimes. How there are entire wings of the castle that are forbidden. How the servants speak of him in whispers. I had noticed. The locked doors, the restricted areas. The way Columbus would sometimes excuse himself abruptly, his jaw tight, something desperate in his eyes. What does this have to do with me? The curse can only be broken by true love, Lady Casey said. Specifically, by a mate who can love him in both forms, man and beast. He's been searching for decades, testing potential mates, trying to find someone who might break it. My chest felt tight. You're saying he chose me because you're desperate enough to accept anything, Cassia finished. You're scarred, powerless, cast off by your own pack. You have nothing to lose and everything to gain by pretending to love a monster. You're the perfect candidate for his experiment. The words hit like physical blows. Everything about the past 3 weeks suddenly recontextualized itself. Columbus's patience, his gentleness, his insistence that I take my time. Had it all been manipulation? A carefully orchestrated plan to make me fall for him so the curse could be broken? I can see you didn't know, Lady Casey said, satisfaction dripping from every word. How unfortunate. But now that you do, perhaps you'll make wiser choices. His Majesty doesn't need a mate, he needs a solution to his curse. And you, my dear, are simply convenient. They stood, moving toward the door with the fluid grace of women who'd delivered their blow and knew it had landed. One more thing, Lady Casey said, pausing at the threshold. The curse transforms him every new moon. That's tomorrow night. If you want to see what you've really bonded yourself to, I suggest you find him after dark. The dungeons, specifically, that's where he hides when the transformation takes him. They left, and I sat alone in the receiving room, my mind racing. A curse, a transformation, a desperate search for someone to break it. Was that all I was? A potential solution to a magical problem? Had the mate bond itself been manufactured somehow? A trick of the curse trying to save itself? I thought about every gentle word Columbus had spoken, every patient gesture, every moment of seeming tenderness. Had any of it been real? Or had I been fooled again, manipulated into caring for someone who saw me as a tool rather than a person? I stood on shaking legs and walked blindly through the castle, barely seeing where I was going. I ended up in the library, my sanctuary, but even here, surrounded by books and sunlight, I couldn't escape the poisonous words Lady Casey had planted. Velma. I turned to find Columbus standing at the entrance to the library, concern etched across his face. He could feel my distress through the bond, I realized. Could sense that something was wrong. Is it true? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Is there a curse? His expression shuddered immediately. Who told you? That's not an answer. Velma. Is it true? Each word was a blade. Are you cursed? Do you transform into something monstrous? Have you been searching for someone desperate enough to love you anyway so the curse can be broken? The silence stretched between us, heavy and damning. Yes, he finally said. There's a curse. The admission knocked the breath from my lungs. I'd been hoping, desperately hoping that Lady Casey had been lying, that it was just another court manipulation. Why didn't you tell me? Because I knew you'd react exactly like this. You'd question everything. Wonder if the bond was real or just part of the curse's design. He took a step toward me, but I backed away. Velma, listen to me. Did you know I was your mate before you saw me in the forest? Or after? After. The moment I saw your face, the bond snapped into place. I felt it. You felt it too, but you didn't tell me about the curse. You let me think this was simple. That you just wanted me for me. I do want you for you. His voice rose, frustration breaking through his usual control. Yes. There's a curse. Yes. I transform. But that has nothing to do with why I claimed you as my mate, doesn't it? I laughed bitterly. A curse that can only be broken by true love? A mate bond that appears conveniently right when you need it? How am I supposed to believe any of this is real? Because I've had 87 years to find a mate, if that was all I wanted. 87 years to manipulate someone, to force a bond, to fake whatever I needed to break this curse. And I haven't, because I was waiting for something real. Or, you just hadn't found anyone desperate enough until me. The words hung in the air between us, cruel and cutting. Columbus's face went blank, the expression of a man who'd been struck somewhere vital. Is that what you think? That I chose you because you were vulnerable? Easy to manipulate? What else am I supposed to think? My hands were shaking. You're a king. I'm nobody. You're powerful. I'm broken. The only reason this makes sense is if you needed something from me. I needed you, he said quietly. Not your compliance. Not your desperation. You. The woman who asked me riddles instead of falling at my feet. The woman who challenged me to prove myself, rather than accepting my word. The woman who's been alone and afraid her entire life, and still hasn't lost her capacity for hope. Pretty words. Are they part of the manipulation too? Something in his expression cracked, then not anger, but something worse. Hurt. Real, genuine hurt that I could feel echoing through the mate bond. I can't make you believe me, he said finally. I can't prove that the bond is real, or that my feelings are genuine. You have to choose to trust me. Or not. How can I trust you when you've been lying to me for 3 weeks? I haven't lied. I just didn't tell you everything. All. That's the same thing. No, it's not. His voice hardened. A lie would be telling you the curse doesn't exist. A lie would be pretending I'm not desperate to break it, but not telling you immediately, when I knew it would make you doubt everything that's self-preservation. Because I knew this would happen. I knew you'd find out, and you'd run, and I'd lose you before we even had a chance. Maybe you should lose me. The words came out before I could stop them. Maybe Lady Casey is right. Maybe I'm just convenient. A solution to your problem. And once the curse is broken, you can find a real mate. Someone appropriate. Don't. Columbus's voice dropped to something dangerous. Don't do this. Don't let them poison what we're building. What are we building? You won't even tell me the truth. You want the truth? He moved closer. And this time I didn't back away. Fine. Yes, I'm cursed. Every new moon, I transform into something between wolf and man, something savage, something I can barely control. It's been happening since I was 20 years old. A punishment for something my great-grandfather did. And yes, the only way to break it is for my mate to love me in both forms, to choose me despite the monster. He was close enough now that I could see the anguish in his silver eyes. And yes, when I felt the mate bond with you, part of me hoped that maybe after all these years, I'd finally found someone who could see past appearances to what lay beneath. Hoped that maybe you, someone who knows what it's like to be judged for how you look, might understand, might not run screaming when you saw what I really am. So, I was convenient. You were hope. His hand lifted toward my face but stopped just short of touching. You were the first real thing I'd felt in decades, and I'm not sorry for wanting that. For wanting you. Even if it makes me selfish, I wanted to believe him. Every instinct I had was screaming to trust the bond, to trust the connection I felt growing between us. But Lady Casey's words echoed in my head, desperate enough to accept anything, convenient, an experiment. I need to think, I said finally. I need time alone. How much time? I don't know. Columbus stepped back, his expression carefully neutral again. The transformation is tomorrow night. If you want to see what you're really bonded to, you're welcome to come to the lower chambers. The choice is yours." He turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing through the library until they faded to nothing. I stood alone among the books and felt the mate bond stretch between us, not breaking, but straining under the weight of doubt and hurt and fear. 3 weeks ago, I'd been nothing, no one, disposable. Now, I was potentially the solution to a king's curse. I didn't know which was worse. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in my bed in the Rose Suite, staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation I'd had with Columbus, looking for the lies, searching for proof that Lady Casey was wrong. But I kept coming back to the same question. Would he have chosen me if there was no curse? Would the mate bond exist at all if he wasn't desperate for a solution? The questions ate at me until dawn, when exhaustion finally pulled me under into restless dreams. I dreamed of riddles with no answers, of bonds that turned into chains, of a king who wore 2 faces, one beautiful, one monstrous, and I couldn't tell which was real. When I woke, the sun was setting, the new moon was rising, and somewhere in the depths of the castle, Columbus was about to transform into whatever the curse had made him. I pulled on my darkest dress, secured my veil, and made a decision. If I was going to judge him, if I was going to decide whether this bond was real or just convenient, I needed to see the truth. All of it. I needed to see the monster. Chapter 7. The separation. The lower chambers were exactly as forbidding as I'd imagined. I'd asked Margot for directions, claiming I'd left a book somewhere I shouldn't have been. She'd looked at me with those knowing eyes and told me how to reach the restricted wing, but her expression had been sad, like she knew exactly where I was really going and why. The corridors grew darker as I descended, the polished marble giving way to rougher stone. Torches burned in sconces along the walls, casting dancing shadows that made the space feel alive. I could hear water dripping somewhere, echoing in the stillness, and beneath it all, I could feel him. The mate bond pulled taut, leading me deeper into the castle's depths like a compass pointing north. I followed it through narrow passages and down spiral stairs, until I reached a heavy iron door reinforced with silver runes. Guards stood on either side, massive men who looked like they could break me in half without effort. They straightened when they saw me, but there was something like pity in their eyes. "Miss Bernard," one of them said, "you shouldn't be here." "I know. Let me pass anyway." "The king gave strict orders. The king is my mate, and I'm asking you to let me through." I pulled back my veil so they could see my scarred face, see that I wasn't some delicate noble who would faint at the first sign of difficulty. "Please." They exchanged glances. Then, reluctantly, one of them pulled out a key and unlocked the door. "The transformation has already started," he warned. "He's not in himself right now. If you go in there, you do so at your own risk." "I understand." The door swung open, revealing another set of stairs leading down into darkness. I descended carefully, my hand trailing along the wall for balance. The bond grew stronger with each step, almost painful in its intensity. At the bottom was another door, this one already open. Beyond it was a chamber that looked like a prison's stone walls. Iron chains bolted to the floor, a space designed to contain something dangerous. But there were also signs of humanity. Books stacked in one corner, blankets piled near the wall, a table with writing implements and half-finished letters. And in the center of it all, chained but not restrained, was Columbus. Or what remained of him. The transformation was grotesque. His body was caught between forms larger than a man, but not quite a full wolf. His bones jutting at unnatural angles, his skin stretched tight over shifting muscle and fur. His face was the worst, human features elongated into something predatory, teeth too sharp, eyes that glowed silver but held no recognition. He was pacing the length of the chamber like a caged animal, each movement jerky and uncoordinated. When he breathed, it came out as something between a growl and a wheeze. I must have made a sound, a gasp, a whimper, because his head snapped toward me with inhuman speed. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then he lunged. The chains caught him before he reached me, jerking him back with brutal force. He snarled, fighting against the restraints, his claws scraping against stone. The sound he made was pure rage, Pure animal instinct with no trace of the thoughtful man I'd been having dinner with for 3 weeks. This was the monster. This was what the curse had made him. And I was terrified. Columbus? My voice came out small, barely audible over his snarling. Can you hear me? The creature wearing his face lunged again, and again the chains held. He was stronger like this. I could see the iron links straining, see the bolts in the wall beginning to bend under the pressure. It's me, Velma, your mate. I took a step closer, even though every instinct I had was screaming to run. I know you're in there somewhere. I can feel you through the bond. Another lunge, another snarl. His silver eyes locked onto mine, but there was nothing in them I recognized. No warmth, no intelligence, just hunger and rage, and something primal that didn't understand words or reason. I stood there for what felt like hours, watching him fight against the chains, watching the transformation continue its cruel work on his body, watching the man I was beginning to care for disappear into something that would tear me apart without hesitation. Lady Casey had been right about one thing. This was what I'd bonded myself to. This was the truth beneath the gentle words and patient gestures. A monster who needed saving, and I was just desperate enough to try. Or I had been 3 weeks ago. Before I'd started to believe that maybe I was worth more than being someone's solution. I'm sorry, I whispered to the creature that couldn't hear me. I'm so sorry. Then I turned and left, climbing the stairs with tears streaming down my face, leaving Columbus alone with his curse. I didn't return to my room. Instead, I went to the library, the only place in this castle that had ever felt safe. I pulled books about curses, about transformations, about mate bonds and magic. I read through the night, searching for answers, for some way to make sense of what I'd seen. The curse was exactly as Lady Casey had described. A punishment passed down through the royal bloodline, triggered by some ancient transgression. Every new moon, the afflicted would transform into something between beast and man, losing all reason and humanity until the moon passed. The only cure was true love, a mate who could love both forms equally, who could see the man within the monster and choose him anyway. But here was the part that made my chest ache. The texts were clear that forced love didn't work. Convenient love didn't work. The mate had to choose freely, without manipulation, without obligation. They had to want the cursed one for who they were, not what they could provide. Which meant if Columbus had been manipulating me, if the bond itself was part of some cosmic arrangement to save him, then it wouldn't work anyway. The curse would never break, unless he genuinely believed the bond was real, unless he honestly thought I was his true mate, regardless of the curse. I sat among the books as dawn broke, exhausted and confused and angry at myself for not knowing what to believe. The truth was, I'd started to fall for him, for the way he listened when I talked, for the way he made me feel seen instead of tolerated, for the careful way he'd been building trust between us, brick by patient brick. But how much of that was real? And how much was desperate hope from a man who'd been cursed for over a century? Miss Bernard? I looked up to find Chancellor Vale standing at the entrance to the library, his expression grave. You went to see him last night. How did you know? The guards reported it to me. They were concerned. He moved closer, studying my face. What did you see? A monster. Exactly like Lady Casey said. Vale sighed, settling into the chair across from mine. And now you're wondering if everything the king told you was a lie. Wasn't it? No. But neither was it the complete truth. He leaned forward, his hands clasped. Velma, I've served the king for 43 years. I've watched him transform every month for all that time. I've seen what the curse does to him, not just physically, but emotionally. The isolation, the shame, the desperate hope every time he meets someone new, followed by the crushing disappointment when it doesn't work. So I'm just the latest disappointment? You're the first person he's ever claimed as a mate. Vale's expression turned serious. In 87 years of ruling, through countless political negotiations and noble daughters practically throwing themselves at him, he's never once felt a mate bond, never once claimed someone as his. Until you. That doesn't mean it's real. Maybe the curse is just getting more desperate. Or maybe the goddess finally sent him someone strong enough to handle the truth. Vale stood, moving to the window. I'm not going to tell you what to do, Velma. That's not my place. But I will say this. If you decide to leave, to reject the bond, the king will let you go. He won't force you to stay. He won't manipulate you into compliance. How do you know? Because he told me so himself. This morning, after the transformation ended, he said if you chose to leave, I was to arrange safe passage back to your pack or anywhere else you wish to go. No questions asked. No consequences. My throat tightened. He's giving me an out. He's giving you a choice, real choice, not the illusion of it. Vale turned back to me. The question is, what will you choose? After he left, I sat alone with that question. What did I want? I thought about going back to Bernard Pack, to my father's house where I was nothing. I thought about finding some other pack, some other place where I could fade into the background and exist without being seen. I thought about staying here, in this beautiful castle with its dark secrets, with a king who might genuinely want me or might just need me. And I realized that no matter what I chose, I'd spend the rest of my life wondering if I'd made the right decision. 3 days passed. I stayed in my room mostly, avoiding Columbus, avoiding the court, avoiding the decision I knew I had to make. Meals appeared at my door. Margot came by with gentle inquiries about my well-being, but otherwise, I was left blessedly alone. The mate bond ached with the separation. I could feel Columbus on the other side of it, distant, careful, giving me the space I'd asked for. But there was something else too. Pain. His pain, mixing with mine, creating a feedback loop of hurt and longing. On the 4th day, a letter appeared with my breakfast. Velma, I've arranged for transportation back to Bernard Pack territory, or to any other destination you choose. Chancellor Vale has funds and documents prepared for your journey. You're free to leave whenever you're ready. I won't try to stop you. I won't ask you to stay. The choice is entirely yours. If you decide to go, know that I understand. Know that I don't blame you. Know that despite everything, I'm grateful for the 3 weeks we had. You reminded me what hope feels like. If you decide to stay, come find me. We'll figure out the rest together. Either way, you'll always be my mate. The bond doesn't break just because we're apart, but I'll learn to live with it if I must. Yours, Columbus. I read the letter 3 times, searching for manipulation, for guilt, for any sign that he was trying to force my hand. But there was nothing, just honesty and pain and the promise of freedom. He was letting me go. The realization hit me like a physical blow. This was what the answer to my riddle looked like. Not a declaration or a grand gesture, but a quiet offering of choice. The freedom to walk away, the trust that I would make the decision that was right for me, even if it destroyed him. A promise, I thought, remembering my riddle from that first night. Something given but never taken. Something that can be broken yet binds. Something invisible that changes everything. He'd been showing me the answer all along. Every patient gesture, every moment of giving me space, every time he'd let me set the pace, he'd been keeping a promise. The promise to value my choice over his own desires. Even now, when losing me would mean losing his only chance at breaking the curse. I set down the letter and made my decision. I found him in the throne room. It was empty, except for him, sitting on the throne with his head in his hands, looking more exhausted than I'd ever seen him. The silver runes on the walls caught the afternoon light, making the whole space feel ethereal and heavy at once. He looked up when I entered, and something in his expression broke when he saw me. "You're still here," he said quietly. "I'm still here." I walked toward the throne, my footsteps echoing in the vast space. "I read your letter. And I have some questions. Real ones this time. No more riddles." He straightened, giving me his full attention. "Ask anything. If the curse breaks, if I somehow manage to be the solution you need, what then? Do I become your queen? Your political liability? The scarred woman who broke a curse but embarrasses you at court functions? You become my mate, my partner, my equal." His voice was firm. "And anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me personally. What if I can't love you? What if I try and it's not enough? Then we'll deal with it. Together." He stood, moving down the steps toward me. Velma, I can't promise you that loving me will be easy. I can't promise that the curse will break, or that court politics won't be brutal. I can't even promise that I won't make mistakes or hurt you unintentionally. He stopped a few feet away, close but not touching. But I can promise that I'll choose you. Every day. Every new moon. Every moment. I'll choose you over propriety, over politics, over everything. Because you're not a solution to my curse. You're the person I want beside me when I figure out how to live with it. Even if the curse never breaks? Even then. I looked at him, really looked, and tried to see past my own fears to what was actually standing in front of me. A man who'd been alone for over a century, who'd been cursed and isolated and desperate for connection, who'd found me in a forest and chosen to be curious instead of disgusted, who was offering me everything and asking for nothing but a chance. I'm terrified, I admitted. So am I. I don't know how to do this. How to trust. How to let someone close without waiting for them to leave. Then we'll learn together. He held out his hand, palm up, an offering rather than a demand. Stay, please, not because of the curse or the bond, or because you have nowhere else to go. Stay because you want to, because you think maybe, possibly, this could be something real. I stared at his hand, at the choice he was offering. Behind me was the door. Freedom, safety, a life where I'd never have to risk being hurt again. Ahead was uncertainty, a cursed king, a bond I didn't fully understand, the possibility of being used or disappointed or rejected all over again, but also books and libraries and gentle conversations, patient gestures and careful trust building. Someone who'd seen my scars and called me hope. I thought about my riddle, about promises given freely and kept faithfully, and I took his hand. I'll stay, I said. But Columbus? If this is going to work, you have to tell me everything. No more secrets, no more hidden information. If we're doing this, we're doing it honestly. Relief flooded his expression, so raw and genuine that I felt it echo through the bond. Everything. I promise. Starting with the curse. How did it start? Why does it exist? What have you tried to break it? He pulled me closer, and for the first time, I let him. Let myself feel the warmth of his body, the solid reality of him, the way the bond hummed with satisfaction at our proximity. It started with my great-grandfather, he said quietly, with a betrayal and a witch's revenge, and it's been passed down through my bloodline ever since, waiting for someone strong enough to end it. Tell me the whole story. I will, all of it. But Velma? He tilted my face up, his thumb tracing the edge of my scar with infinite gentleness. Thank you, for staying, for giving me a chance, for being brave enough to choose despite your fear. Don't thank me yet, I said, but I was smiling beneath my veil. You might regret this when you realize how stubborn I can be. I'm counting on it. We stood there in the empty throne room, hands clasped, the bond settling into something stronger and more certain between us. Outside, I could hear the castle coming to life, servants and guards, nobles and advisors, all the machinery of rule and power. But in this moment, it was just us. Two broken people trying to figure out if they could build something whole together. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There was no magical transformation, no instant cure for either of our wounds. But it was a beginning, and maybe that was enough. Chapter 8. The Public Confrontation and Truth. 2 months passed after I chose to stay. 2 months of learning what it meant to be the Alpha King's mate in truth, not just in name. Columbus kept his promise, no more secrets. He told me everything about the curse, about the decades of failed attempts to break it, about the loneliness that had nearly broken him more thoroughly than any magic could. I told him about my childhood, about my mother's death and my father's rejection, about the years of wearing veils and making myself small, about the stories I'd told myself to survive. We became friends before we became anything else. And somehow, that made everything feel more real. The court was another matter entirely. Lady Casey and her faction had made their displeasure clear through 1,000 small cruelties, whispered comments when I entered a room, strategic snubs at formal dinners, pointed questions about when the king would make his official choice of queen. They couldn't attack me directly, not with Columbus's protection, but they could make sure I never forgot that I didn't belong. Ignore them, Columbus said one evening as we walked through the gardens. It had become our routine, a private hour before dinner, where we could escape the weight of court politics. They're threatened by you, by what you represent. Which is what? A poor choice in mates? Change. Disruption to their carefully laid plans. He guided me toward a bench overlooking the mountains. For years, they've been positioning their daughters, building alliances, assuming they could control who I married and therefore influence my rule. You, an unbonded mate who appeared from nowhere with no political connections, you shattered all of that. I didn't mean to shatter anything. I was just trying to survive. I know. That's what makes you dangerous to them. He took my hand, his thumb tracing familiar patterns on my palm. They can't manipulate someone who doesn't want power. What do I want then? He looked at me, and something in his expression made my breath catch. To be seen, to be chosen, to matter to someone. He was right, though I'd never articulated it that way before. All my life, I'd been invisible or repulsive, never just myself. With Columbus, I could be both scarred and whole, both broken and valuable, both afraid and brave. There's something I need to tell you, he said, his tone shifting to something more serious. The council has been pressuring me to make an official announcement. Either confirm you as my intended queen or pursue other options. My stomach dropped. What did you tell them? That you're my mate and that's not negotiable. But they're requesting a formal ceremony, a public claiming before the entire court. His jaw tightened. It would make our bond official in the eyes of the kingdom, give you legal protection, status, authority, but it would also make you a target. Every noble family that sees you as an obstacle would come for you, legally or otherwise. When? 2 weeks. At the full moon gathering. He squeezed my hand. You don't have to agree to this. I can hold them off, make excuses. No. The word came out stronger than I expected. If we're doing this, if I'm really staying, then let's make it official. Let them see that I'm not going anywhere. Velma, I'm tired of hiding, Columbus. I'm tired of wearing veils and making myself small and apologizing for existing. If being your mate means facing the court, then I'll face them. He stared at me for a long moment, then pulled me close, pressing his forehead against mine. You're incredible. Do you know that? Absolutely incredible. I'm terrified. That's what makes you brave. The 2 weeks passed too quickly. Columbus insisted I have proper training for the ceremony, lessons in court, etiquette, in political maneuvering, in how to navigate conversations with people who wanted me to fail. Chancellor Vale took charge of my education, drilling me on names and faces and alliances until my head spun. Remember, he said, the day before the ceremony, they'll be watching for any sign of weakness, any hesitation, any mistake. You need to project absolute confidence, even if you don't feel it. No pressure then, I muttered. Velma. Vale's expression softened. You've already survived things that would destroy most people. This is just politics. Compared to what you've endured, this is nothing. I wanted to believe him. The full moon gathering was the most important social event of the season. Every noble family in the territories would be present, along with important pack leaders and foreign dignitaries. It was where alliances were forged, where political marriages were announced, where the power structure of the kingdom was put on display, and I would be standing at the center of it, being claimed as the Alpha King's mate. The night of the ceremony, Margot helped me dress, not in servant's clothes or the plain dresses I'd been wearing, but in formal court attire, a gown of deep midnight blue that somehow made my scars look less jarring, silver thread embroidered along the edges that caught the light when I moved. No veil, she said when I reached for it. Margot. The king was explicit. You're to be presented as you are. No hiding. Her expression was gentle but firm. This is your moment, Miss Bernard. Own it. So I walked through the castle corridors with my face bare, feeling more exposed than I ever had in my life. Guards bowed as I passed. Servants stopped their work to stare, and through the mate bond, I could feel Columbus waiting for me, his anticipation and pride mixing with my terror. The grand hall was already full when I arrived, hundreds of people in their finest clothes, arranged in careful hierarchies around the room. The noble families occupied the front sections, closest to the throne. Pack leaders stood in designated areas, everyone positioned according to rank and importance. And there, at the far end of the hall on a raised platform, stood Columbus. He wore full royal regalia, black and silver formal attire, a crown of twisted metal that looked both beautiful and brutal, the royal crest emblazoned across his chest. He looked every inch the Alpha King, powerful and untouchable, until his eyes found mine across the crowded room, and his expression softened into something that was just for me. The herald's voice rang out, presenting Miss Velma Bernard, bonded mate to His Majesty, Alpha King Columbus George. The crowd parted, creating a path from the entrance to the throne. Every eye in the room fixed on me as I walked forward, my footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. I could hear the whispers starting. That's her? The Beta's daughter? Look at her face. Goddess help us. Can't believe he's actually going through with this. I kept my eyes on Columbus, using him as an anchor. One foot in front of the other. Don't stumble. Don't show fear. Halfway to the throne, I passed Lady Casey and Cassia. The older woman's expression was venomous, but she maintained court propriety. Cassia, however, wasn't so restrained. What a shame, she said, just loud enough to carry. I'd hoped the king would come to his senses. I should have ignored her, should have kept walking, but 2 months of small cruelties, of whispered insults, of watching her and her mother try to undermine me at every turn, it all came rushing up at once. I stopped walking. The entire hall held its breath. Lady Cassia, I said, my voice clear and steady. You've made your opinion of me quite clear over these past months, but I wonder, is it really my face you object to? Or is it that I'm standing where you wanted to be? Her face flushed red. How dare? Because from where I'm standing, your cruelty looks a lot like jealousy. I took a step toward her, and she instinctively stepped back. And jealousy looks far uglier than any scar. The whispers exploded around us. No one spoke to noble daughters that way, especially not in public. I'd just committed a massive breach of etiquette, but I didn't care. I'd spent 19 years accepting insults, wearing veils, making myself small. I was done apologizing for existing. Velma. Columbus's voice cut through the noise, not angry, but warning. Come here. I turned back toward the throne and finished my walk, climbing the steps to stand beside him. He took my hand, his grip warm and steady. Well, he said quietly, so only I could hear. That was dramatic. I'm sorry, Don't apologize. She's had that coming for months. He raised our joined hands, presenting me to the court. Let them see that my mate doesn't need my protection to stand up for herself. The formal ceremony began ancient words about bonds and choices, about the moon goddess's blessing, about duty and honor. Chancellor Vale performed the ritual, binding silver cords around our wrists to symbolize the connection between us. Through it all, I felt the mate bond growing stronger, settling into something permanent and unbreakable. And then it was done. Officially, legally, irrevocably, I was the Alpha King's mate. The court erupted in polite applause, though I could see the displeasure on many faces. Lady Casey looked like she'd tasted poison. Several pack leaders appeared calculating, already adjusting their political strategies. The foreign dignitaries seemed merely curious, watching this unexpected development with interest. Columbus pulled me close and whispered, "You did beautifully. I'm so proud of you." Before I could respond, the doors to the hall burst open. Armed men flooded in, at least 20 of them, dressed in dark clothes without any identifying marks. They moved with military precision, fanning out to block the exits. "Nobody move," their leader commanded, stepping forward. He was older, scarred, with the look of a man who'd spent his life fighting. "This is a formal challenge to the Alpha King's rule under ancient law. We claim the right of combat." The hall erupted in chaos. Guards rushed forward, but Columbus raised his hand, stopping them. "On what grounds?" he asked, his voice deadly calm. "On the grounds that you've been cursed for over a century and have hidden it from your people. On the grounds that you've chosen an inappropriate mate who weakens the royal bloodline. on the grounds that your rule has become a liability to the territories." The man smiled coldly. "We offer mercy, step down peacefully, annul the bond with this girl, and accept exile, or face us in combat. Assassination attempt." This was an assassination attempt dressed up as legal challenge. I felt Columbus's hand tighten on mine. Through the bond, I could sense his wolf rising to the surface, dangerous and barely controlled. "And who," he asked softly, "put you up to this?" The man's eyes flicked toward Lady Casey for just a second, just long enough to confirm what we'd suspected. "It doesn't matter who. What matters is that you choose. Now." Columbus released my hand and stepped forward, putting himself between me and the armed men. "My answer is no, to all of it. I won't step down. I won't annul my bond. And I certainly won't be intimidated by hired mercenaries pretending this is about honor. Then you die." The man raised his hand, and his soldiers drew weapons, silver blades that could kill even a shifter if they struck true. Everything happened at once. The mercenaries rushed forward. Columbus's guards engaged them, the hall erupting into violence. Nobles screamed and fled toward the exits. I stood frozen on the platform, watching armed men fight their way toward the throne. Toward me. One of them broke through the guard line, his blade raised, his eyes locked on me. Not Columbus. Me. They were trying to kill me first, to break the mate bond and weaken him. I had no weapons, no wolf to shift into, no way to defend myself. But I had survived 19 years of being called worthless and cursed and broken. I had survived rejection and exile and loneliness. I had survived being told over and over that I wasn't enough, and I wasn't about to die now. I grabbed the ceremonial silver cord from the ritual still wrapped around my wrist and swung it at the mercenary's face. The weighted ends caught him across the eyes, and he stumbled back with a shout. It wasn't much, but it was enough time for Columbus to reach him. What happened next was brutal and efficient. Columbus moved like violence given form, taking down the mercenary with his bare hands, breaking the man's sword arm and using his own momentum against him. He fought like someone who'd spent over a century, perfecting the art of survival. But more mercenaries were coming. Too many. Even with the guards fighting, even with Columbus's skill, we were outnumbered. One of them got close enough to slash at Columbus's side. Blood bloomed across his silver shirt, but he didn't slow down. Didn't even seem to feel it. "Columbus!" I screamed, watching him fight through the pain. He looked back at me, and I saw the decision in his eyes. "Forgive me," he said. Then he transformed. Not the uncontrolled beast from the new moon. This was different, a deliberate shift into something between his human form and his cursed one. Larger, stronger, faster. He kept his mind, his intelligence, but gained the power of the transformation. The crowd that hadn't already fled gasped in horror. They'd heard rumors of the curse, but seeing it was something else entirely. Columbus tore through the remaining mercenaries like they were nothing. Within minutes, it was over, the attackers either subdued or fleeing, the immediate threat neutralized. But the damage was done. The court had seen the curse, seen the monster their king could become, seen the thing he'd been hiding for over 80 years. Columbus stood in the center of the hall, blood spattered and still half transformed, surrounded by whispered horror and disgust. And I realized, this was the moment. The real test, not fighting together, but what came after. Whether I would stand beside him when everyone could see what he was, whether I would choose him publicly, irrevocably, with no room for doubt. The answer to my riddle had been staring me in the face all along. A promise. Something given freely. Something that could be broken but bound you anyway. Something invisible that changed everything. I walked down from the throne platform, past the guards trying to protect me, past the nobles backing away in fear. I walked straight to Columbus, who was starting to shift back to his human form, his silver eyes locked on mine with something like desperation. "Velma, don't," he started. I pulled off the silver cord still wrapped around my wrist and held it up for the entire court to see. "This is my promise," I said, my voice carrying through the shocked silence. "To stand beside him. To choose him. To love him as he is. Not as you think he should be." I wrapped the cord around both our wrists again. binding us together in a way that had nothing to do with ceremony and everything to do with choice. You wanted to know if I could love the monster, I said quietly, for him alone. Here's your answer. Columbus's transformation completed, leaving him human again but shaking, his eyes bright with emotion I couldn't name. You don't have to do this, he whispered. You don't have to bind yourself to this publicly. The curse isn't who you are. It's something that happened to you. I tightened my grip on the cord. And I'm done letting fear make my choices. I choose you, Columbus. I choose us. I choose this, even if it's hard, even if they never accept it, even if the curse never breaks. Velma, that's my answer to the riddle. A promise. This promise. To you, right here, right now, in front of everyone. The silver cord between us began to glow. At first, I thought I was imagining it a trick of the light, a reflection of the torches. But no, it was real. The cord was glowing with genuine light, growing brighter by the second. Columbus stared at our bound wrists in shock. It's working. The curse is breaking. What? True love given freely. A choice made without obligation or force. That's the key. His voice was wondering, almost disbelieving. You chose me. Really chose me. Not because you had to, not because of the bond, but because you wanted to. The light spread from the cord up his arms, across his chest, enveloping his entire body. I felt the mate bond surge with power, felt something ancient and magical reshaping itself between us. When the light faded, Columbus looked the same but different. The shadows that had always lingered at the edges of his eyes were gone. The weight he'd carried for over a century had lifted. He looked younger, lighter, like something heavy had finally been set down. It's gone, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I can feel it. The curse is gone. The court watched in stunned silence as their cursed king stood before them, freed by the love of a scarred girl who had every reason to reject him and chose to stay instead. Lady Casey was the first to move, pushing through the crowd toward the exit. But Chancellor Vale's voice stopped her. Lady Casey, you'll remain where you are. There are questions about your involvement in tonight's attack that need answering. Her face went white, but she had nowhere to run. The guards were already moving to detain her and her daughter. Columbus pulled me close, his forehead resting against mine. You saved me. You actually saved me. We saved each other, I corrected. That's how this works, right? Partners, equals. Partners, he agreed. Then he lifted his head and addressed the court, his voice ringing with authority. Let it be known throughout the territories. Velma Bernard is my mate, my queen, and anyone who questions her place does so at their own peril. The curse is broken. My bloodline is secure, and I will spend the rest of my considerably long life making sure she never regrets choosing me. The court erupted in applause, some genuine, some merely political, but it didn't matter. We'd won, not just against the assassination attempt or the curse, but against everyone who'd said we didn't belong together. Later, much later, after the guards had cleared the hall and the healers had tended to the wounded, and Chancellor Vale had begun the process of rooting out Lady Casey's co-conspirators, Columbus and I stood alone on the balcony overlooking the castle grounds. You never answered my riddle, I said. Not properly. Yes, I did. He pulled me against his side, his arm warm around my shoulders. I showed you, instead of telling you. A promise, that's what binds us. Not the mate bond or the curse or political necessity. Just a promise to choose each other, every day, no matter what comes. That's a good answer. It's the only answer that matters. He pressed a kiss to the top of my head. Thank you, Velma. For seeing past the curse to who I really am. For choosing me when you had every reason not to. Thank you for waiting, I said. For letting me take my time. For not forcing me into anything. We stood there as the full moon rose over the mountains. Two people who'd been broken in different ways learning what it meant to be whole together. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. Epilogue. After the curse breaks, the library had become our sanctuary. Not the grand public library where court scholars still worked and nobles occasionally browsed, but a smaller, private space Columbus had created for me in the East Wing. floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the mountains. Shelves filled with books I'd collected over the past year, some ancient, some new, all chosen because they called to me. Deep chairs positioned near the fireplace, where we could read together in comfortable silence. It was late afternoon, the kind of golden autumn light that made everything feel suspended in amber. I sat curled in my favorite chair, working on the manuscript I'd been writing for months, a collection of stories about curses and choices, about being broken and choosing to heal anyway. Columbus entered quietly, but I felt him through the bond before I saw him. A year later, and that connection still thrilled me, the constant awareness of his presence, his emotions, his love wrapping around me like a physical thing. "You're back early," I said, looking up from my writing. The border negotiations finished ahead of schedule. He moved to stand behind my chair, his hands settling on my shoulders. Apparently, when the curse-breaking Alpha King asks for cooperation, people are more inclined to give it. I tilted my head back to look at him. His hair had grown longer over the past year, falling past his collar now. The shadows that had haunted his eyes were gone, replaced by something lighter, happier. He looked like someone who'd learned how to rest. "Still strange, isn't it?" I asked. "Being known for breaking a century-old curse instead of bearing it?" Every day, his thumb traced the edge of my scar, a gesture that had become habit between us. But I prefer this version of famous. I set aside my manuscript and stood, turning to face him properly. We'd grown comfortable with touch over the past year, learning each other's boundaries and preferences, learning that intimacy wasn't always physical, that sometimes it was just standing close and breathing the same air. "I have something to show you," he said, his expression shifting to something I couldn't quite read. Nervous, maybe, which was unusual for him. "What is it?" Instead of answering, he took my hand and led me through the castle corridors, not toward his chambers or the throne room, but deeper into the residential wings. We stopped at a door I'd never paid much attention to. It had always been locked, always listed as storage in the castle maps. Columbus pulled out a key and opened it. Beyond was a suite of rooms even more beautiful than my original guest quarters. A bedroom with windows facing east to catch the sunrise. A sitting area with bookshelves already filled. A smaller room set up as a writing space, with a desk positioned to overlook the gardens. And in the bedroom, tucked against the wall, was a cradle. My breath caught. "Columbus, I know we can't have biological children," he said quickly, the words tumbling out like he'd been rehearsing them. "I know the healers confirmed your barrenness, and I know we've talked about being enough for each other. But I've been thinking there are children in the territories who need homes, children who've lost parents to war or sickness, children who are alone and afraid, the way you once were." He moved to the cradle, his hand resting on the smooth wood. "I spoke with the orphanages in 3 territories. There's a girl, barely 6 months old, whose mother died in childbirth, and whose father couldn't care for her. They were going to send her to a labor house when she's old enough. And I thought, you want to adopt her?" My voice came out strangled with emotion. "I want us to adopt her. If you're willing." He turned to face me, and I saw genuine fear in his expression. "I know it's not what you expected. I know you might have wanted time to be just us for longer. But when I met her, when I held her Velma, she smiled at me. This tiny thing who has every reason to be afraid of the world. And she smiled." I crossed the room to stand beside him, looking down at the cradle that was waiting for a child, imagining what it would mean to give someone else the safety and love we'd found with each other, to break the cycle of abandonment and shame that had marked both our lives. "What's her name?" I asked. "They called her Harry at the orphanage. But we could change it if you want. Give her a fresh start. Harry." I tested the name, feeling how it fit. "Harry George. You're willing?" Hope crept into his voice. "You want to do this?" Instead of answering directly, I asked, "Do you remember my riddle, the one from that first night?" A promise, something given freely, that binds, that changes everything. That's what this is, isn't it? Another promise. To a child who needs what we needed to be chosen, to matter, to have someone say, "You're mine, and I'm keeping you." Columbus pulled me close, his arms wrapping around me with familiar strength. "You understand." "Of course I understand. I was that child. I pressed my face against his chest, breathing in cedar and mountain air and home. When do we bring her here? Whenever you're ready. Today, tomorrow, next week. Chancellor Vale has already prepared all the legal documents. She's ours if we want her. I want her. The certainty in my voice surprised even me. I want to give her everything we didn't have, everything we had to fight for. We stood there in the empty nursery, planning a future that included tiny clothes and midnight feedings, and teaching someone else that being different didn't mean being less. Harry came home 3 days later. She was perfect in the way all babies are, tiny and fragile and completely dependent. Dark hair, gray eyes that might turn silver or might stay storm-colored. She cried when the orphanage matron handed her over, but settled when Columbus held her, her small fist curling around his finger. "Hello, little one," he said softly. "Welcome to your new home." The court had opinions, of course. Some praised our generosity. Others whispered that adopting a common orphan was beneath the royal family's dignity. Lady Casey, currently under house arrest, awaiting trial, sent a letter saying that adopting was an admission that I was truly barren and useless. I burned the letter and didn't respond. We had more important things to focus on, like teaching Harry that she was safe, that she was wanted, that this strange castle full of people was her home now. The first month was exhausting. Harry had nightmares, crying for hours in the darkness. She flinched when people moved too quickly. She hoarded food in her tiny fists, afraid it would disappear. I understood every behavior. I'd done similar things at her age and older, survival instincts carved into a child who'd learned the world wasn't safe. "It's okay," I whispered to her during one particularly bad night, rocking her while Columbus paced and tried to help. "It's okay to be afraid. It's okay to not trust us yet. We'll wait. We'll be here. We'll prove that this is different." Slowly, she began to believe us. 6 months after Harry arrived, I found Columbus in the nursery just before dawn. He was sitting in the rocking chair, holding our daughter while she slept, his expression soft in the early light. "Can't sleep?" I asked quietly. "Didn't want to." He looked up, and I saw joy written across his features. "I keep thinking about how different my life could have been. If I hadn't found you, if the curse had never broken, if I'd given up on ever being happy." I moved to sit on the arm of the chair, my hand settling on his shoulder. "But you didn't give up. You kept choosing hope, even when it seemed impossible. So did you." He shifted Harry carefully, making room for me. "That's what saved us both, I think. Not magic or fate or destiny, just the stubborn choice to keep hoping." Harry stirred, making small sounds in her sleep. She'd grown so much in 6 months, less fragile, more certain of her place in the world. She laughed now, reached for us when she wanted comfort, called us Papa and Mama in her baby babble. She was healing. We all were. 1 year after Harry's arrival, we held a small ceremony in the castle gardens. Not a formal court event, we'd had enough of those. Just close friends, trusted advisors, people who'd supported us through the chaos of the past 2 years. Margot and Chancellor Vale, the guards who'd fought beside us, a few pack leaders who'd proven themselves genuine allies, and Harry, of course. 2 years old now, running through the garden in a white dress that she'd already managed to stain with grass and dirt. "What's the occasion?" Vale asked, watching Harry chase butterflies with the intensity only toddlers possessed. "An anniversary," Columbus said. 2 years since Velma arrived here. 2 years since my life changed completely. Since both our lives changed, I corrected, leaning against him. "True." He wrapped an arm around my waist, pulling me close. I wanted to mark it somehow. To acknowledge that we made it. Through the curse, through the assassination attempt, through learning how to be partners and parents and everything else. "And you chose a garden party?" Margot asked, amused. "I chose witnesses," Columbus corrected. "Because I have one more promise to make, and I want everyone here to hold me to it." He turned to face me, taking both my hands in his. "Velma, Bernard George, 2 years ago you walked into my castle wearing a veil and carrying scars you thought made you worthless. You answered my questions with riddles. You challenged me to prove myself. You chose to stay when you had every reason to run. His thumbs traced circles on my palms, the gesture intimately familiar. You taught me that love isn't about fixing each other, it's about seeing each other as we are and choosing to stay anyway. You broke a curse that had lasted over a century, not with magic, but with the simple choice to believe I was worth saving. You gave me a daughter when I thought I'd never have a family. Columbus, let me finish. His silver eyes held mine, intense and warm. My promise to you is this: I will spend every day of my very long life choosing you, choosing us, choosing this family we've built. I will never make you feel disposable or worthless, or like you need to earn your place here. You are my mate, my queen, my partner, my home, and nothing, not court politics or public opinion, or any challenge we face will ever change that. Tears were streaming down my face now. After 2 years together, he could still undo me with words. That's a good promise, I managed. It's the only promise that matters. He pulled me close, pressing his forehead against mine. Do you accept it? On one condition. Name it. You let me make one too. I pulled back enough to see his face clearly. My promise is this: I will stop waiting for you to reject me. I will stop looking for reasons why this can't work. I will trust that when you say you love me, you mean it. And I will let myself be happy, even when it's scary, even when I don't think I deserve it. Especially when you don't think you deserve it, Columbus corrected gently. Especially then, I smiled through my tears. We've earned this, haven't we? This happiness. This peace. Yes, we have. Harry chose that moment to crash into our legs, demanding attention with all the subtle grace of a 2-year-old. Columbus scooped her up, settling her on his hip, and she immediately reached for me, wanting both parents close. Tell me the riddle, Mama, she demanded. It had become her favorite game, asking me to recite the riddle I'd asked Columbus on our first night, even though she was too young to understand it. I am given, but never taken. I began, the words familiar and comfortable now. I can be broken, yet I bind. I am invisible, yet I change everything. I am freely offered, yet worth more than gold. What am I? Promise, Harry shouted triumphantly. We'd taught her the answer months ago. That's right, little one. Columbus pressed a kiss to her dark hair. A promise. The most important thing in the world. We stood there in the garden, our small family, surrounded by people who'd helped us survive and thrive. The sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. Harry babbled about butterflies and flowers, already distracted by something new, and I realized. This was the answer to every question I'd ever asked. Not a fairy tale ending where everything was perfect. Not a magical fix that erased all our scars and struggles. Just this: a man who kept his promises, a daughter who was learning to trust, a life built on choices rather than fate, days that were sometimes hard and sometimes easy, but always worth living, nights where I could sleep without fear of rejection or abandonment, a home, a real one. Finally, what are you thinking about? Columbus asked softly. I looked at him, at the man who'd seen my scars and called them beautiful, who'd been patient when I was afraid, who'd given me space to choose and time to heal, who'd kept every promise he'd ever made to me. I'm thinking about stories, I said. About how they always end with happily ever after, but they never show what that looks like. The everyday work of it. The choosing and compromising and growing together. What would our story say if someone wrote it down? I thought about it. About the cursed king and the scarred girl, about rejection and redemption, about promises kept in the darkness. It would say that we found each other in the broken places, that we learned to see beauty in unexpected forms, that love isn't about being perfect, it's about being chosen. I shifted Harry in Columbus's arms so I could touch his face, feeling the familiar planes and angles, and it would say that sometimes the best endings are really just beginnings in disguise. I like that ending, Columbus said. It's not an ending, I smiled. It's a promise, for tomorrow and every day after that. Harry squirmed, demanding to be set down so she could chase more butterflies. We let her go, watching her run through the garden, with the abandon of a child who'd never known real fear, who'd only ever known being wanted. And in that moment, standing in the golden light with my mate's hand in mine, and our daughter's laughter echoing through the garden. I finally understood what the stories never said. Happily ever after wasn't a destination. It was a choice. Made daily, sometimes hourly. To keep choosing love, even when it was hard. To keep choosing trust, even when you were scared. To keep choosing hope, even when the world tried to convince you that you didn't deserve it. It was a promise, and I intended to keep it.